Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I'm Vince D'Addario. That's Brian Driscoll, and we are back for a Wednesday edition of the podcast, and it is buy, sell, hold day. One of the growing on me as one of my favorite days of the week, Brian. I'm not going to lie. I don't know that anything could ever surpass Friday free-for-all mailbag, but I'm excited about today. Buy, sell, hold is fun because I purposely do not go into the buy, sell, hold, conversation thread over on the board so that pretty much every question that comes up is brand new to me. And I like that. I like being on my toes. I don't like doing a lot of research.
Totally likes being unprepared for shows. Like, that's his favorite there.
That's one way to spin it, I suppose. That's not really. that's one way to go.
Sorry. Yeah.
Well,
great. It's also cool because it's different from. It's kind of different from just asking questions, because the question is just like, okay, what's the latest with so-and-so? That's it. Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame is going to land so-and-so, or, things like that. And for the most part, people have kind of figured it out. Like, what's the difference between a buy, sell, hold and a mailbag question? There's a couple early on. And then sometimes like, okay, I'll just reword it a little bit to make it a buy, sell, hold as opposed to just a. Which someone even put on there, like, is this a we in, we out? And I was like, bro, wrong show. I mean, like,
that's later.
Yeah, that's tonight or tomorrow, something
tomorrow.
like that. Tomorrow.
Well, normally tomorrow.
Yeah, Friday. So I'm not sure what they're gonna do this week. But
we are doing that Friday, by the way.
That's gonna be fun.
Yes.
So Ben, so we're also gonna have a little bit of a change this week, just to let people know the schedule. So I may do a live show tomorrow. I haven't decided yet, just depends on how Sadie's doing and Ange is doing. Our dog had big surgery yesterday, so we're taking care of her, and obviously that's keeping Angela pretty busy. So we'll kind of see what our plans are tomorrow. Friday, we're actually gonna have 3 shows. We're gonna have a show at 1:00, normal show, Vince and I. Then at some point in time on Friday, we're gonna have a special show, just almost say, and then of course the rapid fire later in the day as well. So, and I think that might, I don't know.
I think we're gonna do a buy, sell, hold. Or not buy, sell, hold.
We in, we out.
We in, we out.
But moving it back a little bit.
I think that's what we're going to do on Friday. So, because it's just going to be me and Sean. Jesse's not going to be around, so it's just going to be the two of us, and so we'll figure it out.
And Saturday, Vince and I are going to do the mailbag.
We're back.
So since there's some stuff going on Friday and some different things going on Friday, we wanted to move them, and because we might miss tomorrow's show, we wanted to make sure we got everything. So we're kind of pushing everything back a day. So then we'll do the mailbag on Saturday. We'll probably start that at noon.
Yep.
Is when we're going to start that, since it's a Saturday. So we'll start that at noon. So Saturday, the mailbag will be at noon. So we'll get it up around 10:30, 11, so you guys can start putting your questions in. So just to give everybody a heads up, pushing everything back. I still may do a show tomorrow. We'll see, but definitely make up for multiple shows on Friday. And the mailbag will be on Saturday. So, Vince, without further ado, it's time to rock and roll.
Should have some like music behind this or something.
Sell, hold.
All right, our first question comes from Double Bogey. Buy one, sell one, no holds. He's already changing the rules on the first question. All right. NOB.
First of all, this is my show. And if I want to do hold, I'm going to do hold. Also, just a reminder to people, the buy sell holds are submitted by premium members on the message board. So these are from premium message board members only. We do not take buy sell hold submissions during the show unless you do a super chat. So just a reminder on that. But we'll go ahead and, because I like Double Bogey, we'll go ahead and honor his no holds.
Sounds like my golf game. But anyway, here we go. So you got to buy one, you got to sell one. And these are all recruiting related. So Nathaniel Owusu Boateng or Madden for Ramo, Meadows or Robinson, Blair or Taylor.
So it's a buy or sell for each of those 3. So on the first one, buy, of those two, I would probably buy Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng and sell Madden Faremo, but I'll just say that's because I'm forced to do one or the other.
Right.
I still believe Notre Dame is in front for both of them. For Derek Meadows and Dylan Robinson, I will buy Dylan Robinson and sell Derek Meadows, although I think Notre Dame is in it for both. I like where they are with Dylan Robinson better. There's still closing to be done there. Like, there's definitely still work to be done on both of those. And then Jadon Blair, Ivan Taylor. This is the one I like the least, but as of right now, I would buy Jadon Blair and sell Ivan Taylor. But again, I think the odds of Notre Dame keeping Ivan Taylor in the class are at worst 50-50. So I think, I'm going to honor it, the buy, sell, hold, but I still feel that in two of those three scenarios, I do believe Notre Dame is still in position to land both of them. So just wanted to make sure we're clear on that, since Mr. Double Bogey said we couldn't do holds. Otherwise, I would have done a hold. I'm do hold because I'm not buying or selling, because I think they'll get both of them.
Oh, I got you.
So
you can't buy both of them?
No, you want buy one, sell one, no holds. Yeah. If I'm going to respect the no holds, then I should respect the buy one, sell one.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Cool. Irish BH 70 buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame has a better than 50-50 chance of going undefeated in the regular season and a playoff win. So just one playoff win.
I'm going to have to sell that, Vince, because right now my prediction is Notre Dame goes 11-1.
Sure.
I don't know who I have them losing to, but right now my prediction is that Notre Dame goes 11-1.
Yeah.
So I'm going to sell that, but is it better than 50-50? Look, if you were to say Notre Dame's going to make the playoff and win a playoff game, I'd buy that.
Yes.
It just going undefeated is very hard. And I've already said, I don't think anybody goes undefeated this year, not at the Power 4 level. You may have like a Liberty or somebody like that goes undefeated, but I don't think you're going to have a Power 5 team go undefeated. I think the Big Ten probably has the best chance of having a team go undefeated, just because I don't think Oregon and Ohio State schedules are just super, super tough. However, the challenge that could be for the regular season, but then the challenge there is they might have to play each other in a rematch in the postseason. So that's a tough one. So I'm going to sell that simply because my prediction is 11-1, and I'm trying to be consistent in my answers. But
sure,
I don't think the submission is nuts.
No, I don't think the submission is nuts at all. And it says, do they have better than a 50% chance of going undefeated? Yeah, I'll take that. I'll say they got a 51% chance of going undefeated. It's not hugely higher, but I think they have a better chance. I will take it. 51-49, Notre Dame goes undefeated, wins a playoff game. I think they've got a great chance of winning the playoff game. I feel very good about that. Especially
I feel better about that than I do of them going undefeated.
Oh, 100%. Because if they're 11-1 or 12-0, either one, they're hosting a playoff game. And I'm ridiculously excited about the prospect of Notre Dame hosting in December and, everything that goes along with that. And, all of it. I'm excited about that. So I do think that they win that game regardless. You're absolutely correct in that will they go undefeated or not? They've gone undefeated twice in the last, 12 years? 3 times in the last 12 years? Okay.
12, 18, and 20.
That's right. Okay. I always forget about 20.
So unless you count the conference championship game as sort of part of the regular season, then you could say twice.
That's fair. I wasn't discluding that. I just always forget about, because 20 was just such a weird year.
Very weird
with the conference and the whole thing. But
yeah,
can they go undefeated? Sure, they can go undefeated. That's definitely a possibility. But this is not. We discussed this many times. This is not the easy cakewalk schedule that everybody makes it out to be, that Notre Dame is just going to walk through. And if they don't, there's some sort of a failure as a team. So I'll just give it the 51%, that they go undefeated. And then that would make this a buy. So I'll be a little optimistic on this one.
I definitely think they're capable of being undefeated.
Sure.
It's hard to predict that.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you're just like, look, they're going to stub their toe at some point in time. You say, well, this is my favorite. Great teams don't lose to bad teams. And I'm like, yeah, except for 2018 Ohio State, 2017 Clemson.
It happens all the time.
2016 Clemson, 2019 Georgia. We could kind of go down the line. That happens.
But isn't that what we love about college football in the first place? So, yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. We had a couple super chats, Vince. So we have a super chat here, a buy sell hold from AST12321. Buy sell hold. Notre Dame can field a championship caliber defense that can be the driver of the title without paying $500,000 a year to land top 30 caliber defensive linemen.
This is a loaded question, in my opinion, because Notre Dame's just not offering blank checks to any recruits coming out of high school. I mean, they're presenting packages of what you could earn and what your future could look like at Notre Dame and things of that nature. But they're not just handing out, you know what, you walk in the door, I'm going to hand you a check for $500,000. Like that's never going to happen at Notre Dame. And somehow they've been able to field, in my opinion, a championship caliber defense multiple times over the last decade. The defense hasn't been the problem for Notre Dame as far as winning a championship is concerned. And so I will buy this, that they can field a championship caliber defense without paying $500,000 a year for a top 30 caliber defensive line. I think they can do it because I have empirical evidence that they've done it already in the past. And so, yes, this is a buy for me.
It's a complicated thing, in my opinion, because you could say, well, hey, my first instinct was this. Well, yeah, they had a championship caliber defense last year and didn't have any defensive linemen they paid $500,000 a year for. The counter to that would be, yeah, but those guys didn't come to Notre Dame when $500,000 offers were on the table.
Sure.
Okay, fair. Yeah. I don't see Howard Cross as being a guy that was getting $500,000. I don't see Riley Mills as being that kind of guy. Maybe because he was a top 150 player. He was a top 30 caliber off defensive lineman. Jordan Patel was a top 30 caliber defensive lineman. He might have been someone more prone to an NIL deal, but would he have gotten $500,000? I doubt it. So I don't know that there's a bunch of dudes that would have got those kind of offers on the roster and on the D line, and they've got a championship caliber defense with that kind of D line. I mean, obviously Bryce Young, maybe he's not a guy that comes to Notre Dame if his dad's not a Notre Dame alum. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe he would have got bigger deals. I think he broke out so late that I think it would have been harder.
That is true. Because when he was first on the board, he was not. It was like, oh, well, they're bringing him on because of who his dad is.
Right.
I mean, that was the talk. I remember when he was kind of in that realm, and but then he just exploded, all of a sudden senior year.
But then they went out and got a top 30 defensive lineman this year in Christopher Burgess, who's not a guy they're paying $500,000 a year for. So I certainly think it's possible. I think it gets – here's the thing about the highly ranked guys. People say, you got to get the studs. I'm like, yeah, you got to have studs. You need impact players on the D-line. There's no doubt.
Sure.
The premise that I don't accept, however, is that you can only get those studs from the top 30 defensive linemen in the country. And yeah, some of those guys end up being really good. Some of those guys you give $500,000 to, they end up not panning out. And that's not a great investment. So there's plenty of guys that have panned out to be great defensive linemen that are not big time recruits. That's why you need great evaluators at Notre Dame. You have to be willing to compete for those top guys. Mm-hmm. You have to be willing to go get some of those top guys. You're going to miss a bunch of them, but every year you got to land one of them, like the high level guys. And, those are some of the missed opportunities that I think Notre Dame had in this class. You saw Marco Jones yesterday commit to Texas A&M. I think that's a battle Notre Dame could have won. They just chose not to fight it. So, I shouldn't say they. One coach chose not to fight it. So, but, overall, I think they can find those kind of guys. Because, yes, like here's the thing about like stars and stuff like that. The only thing that really matters is this. Yes, a higher percentage of guys that are 5 stars or top 100 guys pan out than guys with 3 stars. Okay, no one's ever denied that. But you're still kind of playing a little bit of Russian roulette when you're assuming that the guys you're going to get that you pay that money for are going to be the ones that pan out. That's my issue. Like, look, Notre Dame has had 3 Butkus Award winners. 2 of them are 5-star recruits. One of them was a 3-star recruit. Notre Dame flipped at the end after Mike Elko and Clark Lee got hired, who they beat Wake Forest, Virginia, and Michigan State for, Jeremiah Usu-Koromoa. So you can find studs. You just better be really good at evaluating, and you better be really good at developing. That's going to be the key. But you can't just get lazy and only settle for those guys. But Notre Dame is getting some of those players. Bryce Young was that kind of player. Christopher Burgess is that kind of player. Now they got to land some more of those high-level guys, whether he be ranked in the top 30 or someone like an Isaiah Foskey, who I said coming out, like, this is a dude. This is a guy with a high ceiling. I don't care what his ranking is. This is a guy. He was not a top 200 player. Nobody had Isaiah Foskey in top 200, but you looked at that guy and you're like, yeah, that's a really good football player. They've got to make sure they're still getting guys like that. Those Isaiah Foskey types, those Riley Mills types, those guys like that maybe they're not highly ranked, but you know the upside. I remember talking to Clark Lee. I was sitting there doing the summer interview back when we'd get those one-on-ones with the coordinators. And I'm interviewing Clark Lee, and he was telling me about, Isaiah Foskey, and he's just like, the kid walks into my office and he could barely fit. His shoulders were so broad. He's being a bit hyperbolic, but he's like, you could just see it. And at the time, Isaiah thought he was going to go play tight end. And Notre Dame's the one that convinced him to play defense. And then, of course, the rest is history. So you've got to be able to find some guys like that. And not all of them are going to be top 30 guys, but you need impact players. There's no doubt. You're not winning with just a bunch of solid players.
Sure.
You need impact players. I just don't accept the premise that the only place you can find impact players is in the top 30. I don't agree with that premise. I don't. But when you can get those guys, fight for them and go get them.
Sure.
And they've done that a little bit. They just got to do it more, in my opinion. So I'm buying the overall premise. I am. I think you can win a championship without paying $500 to land a top 30 caliber defensive lineman. Because the other caveat too is, Vince, not every top 30 defensive lineman's asking for that kind of handout.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, Notre Dame's landed top 30 players at positions, and they're not getting payouts like that. And so yeah, I don't think every kid plays that game. Some kid, look, that doesn't mean kids don't care about NIL. Every kid should care about NIL to some degree.
Oh, 100%.
It just shouldn't be your driving factor, in my opinion, unless it's just an insane offer that you just can't refuse. Like, everybody's offering me $50,000 and this school's offering me $5 million. Okay, cool. Man,
it depends on what school you're going to. All of those. Like, I had a kid who was super pumped about the fact that he got the NIL deal for the college football game. And he was kicking with Dylan yesterday. And he's like, oh, I'm so excited to be in this game. They gave me money and I got the game. And like, super excited about it because he goes to a MAC school. So he's on a D1 roster. So he got the same deal that guys are getting at Georgia. You know what I mean? And so he was super fired up about it. So of course, NIL is a thing and it's important and all of those things, but it's not the be all end all. And different things get different guys excited. You know what I mean? And so yeah, it's all perspective is what it is. It's all perspective, and you have to have the right pitch. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. You got to have the right pitch, and Notre Dame's pitch does not land for everybody. It just doesn't, right?
Even if they're offering $500,000,
exactly, 100%. And so that's just the way it is. Just like Georgia's pitch doesn't work for everybody, or Texas, or name your school. So it has to be the right fit, and NIL is just part of the equation now. So you have to use it and hope that the guys you're trying to recruit are on the same page as you.
Yep. Got another super chat from, this is insured by Big, not a buy, sell, hold, but a super chat. We appreciate you, man. This is our resident LSU fan. He says, always appreciate the content and LSU slander. Haha, just kidding. Have a blessed fourth. Go Tigers.
That's great.
So I got to do it like go Tigers. I always got to do it like it.
Absolutely. Go Tigers.
And if you think there's some slander against LSU now, my friend, wait till we get to some of these buy, sell, hold questions. I'm just letting you know. I'm just preparing you, my dude. Just preparing you.
Well, sorry, man. Sorry.
Michael Maroney with a super chat. Thank you, Michael. Look for my buy, sell, hold above. Lambert will be 330 next fall, and this was his buy, sell, hold. So he put this in.
Okay.
I said, hey, we only do super chat. So he gave a super chat so that we would read this one.
He says, buy, sell, hold. Marcus Freeman will announce in his first presser in camp, which will be July 31st, that Wagner has moved to the defensive line.
Humongous sell.
Yeah.
Number one, like, Notre Dame is absolutely loaded on the defensive line and a defensive tackle. Loaded. They're going to have a kid that I gave Ryan and I both gave 5-star upside grade to. Armel Mukum will at best be 4th string when camp starts. There's no need to move Emil Wagner. Like, I don't understand this.
Yeah.
And Michael, you're not alone, my dude. I'm not even coming at you, but like, there was somebody that was like, hey, are they going to, go out and get any portal D tackles? I was like, why?
Right.
Like, why do they need portal D tackles? I don't understand that one. But no, they won't be moving him to the D line. And the kid's going into fall camp in a battle to win the starting right tackle job. There's a 100,000% better chance that he's the starting right tackle than he moves to the defensive line. So I'm definitely selling that one.
And plays too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they wouldn't make a move like that to make him the fourth string, whatever. You know what I mean? Like that would not happen.
And he wasn't that good of a defensive lineman in high school. Like he was a good high school defensive lineman, but he wasn't a guy like
big,
and
long.
Ryan used to say this all the time. Ryan used to talk about Cooper Flanagan. He was like, dude, I would move to Cooper Flanagan to D-line. He would say that all the time. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. Like Cooper was a really good D lineman at De La Salle in California. Like, okay. Like I like him a tight end too, but I can see that. I didn't watch Emil Wagner in high school and be like, dude, I think he could be a really good D tackle. Just same with Rocco Spindler. Because people have asked that about him before. Some schools recruit him as a D lineman, and I'm like, I don't get that one. Like, I didn't think he was that kind of defensive lineman.
That was the talk when he wasn't starting, and he was kind of on the outs there for a little while. It's like, well, they need to move him to defense. It's like, oh,
yeah, didn't quite understand that one, but yeah, he's not a defensive lineman, so no, they won't be doing that one. But I do appreciate the super chat.
Absolutely, thanks, Michael.
And now it's time to get back up to the ones from before.
Nice. Rhesus Christ. Here we go. Buy, sell, hold. Outside of Love and Price, Notre Dame's running backs gained 600 yards. So
that's so whenever, Vince, just so you know, whenever I answer these questions, I always kind of look at it from the standpoint of 12 plus 1. That's kind of the normal 13, looking back at what stats are over the course of the season at 12 plus 1. I mean, if like, okay, you tell me Notre Dame's going to get to the semifinals or championship, I'm going to say, okay, yeah, I'm going to buy that one. But just on a 12 plus 1, the other running backs gain a total of 600 yards. Boy, I'm going to sell that because I just have a hard time like seeing, barring injury, I don't think they get quite there. I could see like Keidron having 250, Kyron having around 250, and then Devin Ford would need over 100. I don't know that I can get there. Or one would need 300. They'd both need to average 300. I just don't see that yet. Like they're going to have a lot of blowouts, but I don't see that. Because like you could say, well, like last year, Notre Dame's backup running backs had over 600 yards rushing, and that's very true. But one of their quote-unquote backup running backs was their number 2. In this scenario, you're taking the number 2 out of the equation.
Right.
So if you were to go, actually, this is kind of interesting because I'm actually doing this on the fly. If you were to take Notre Dame's number 2 running backs out of the equation last year, and you just looked at Jabron Payne, Jadarian Price, and Devin Ford, you'd get to 484. So they would have been well short last year, in that scenario.
I think another piece to this puzzle also is that you're going to get more yards out of Riley Leonard on the ground.
That's a great point.
And that's going to take some carries away from maybe some of those other backs. And again, there's only so many plays. There's only so many footballs. And if Riley Leonard is rushing, designed run, I'm not talking about scrambles and things like that, but designed runs where he's meant to carry the ball. In the past, those would be running backs. And maybe some of those carries fall to maybe the third or fourth guy. But I think with Riley Leonard being the runner that he is, I think that takes away from carries that those guys would have had. And so I have to sell this as well. Just another aspect. All right. Buy, sell, hold. Given that Riley stays healthy and Notre Dame makes the playoffs, he will finish top 3 in Heisman voting.
I mean, I could buy that. I don't know. I would need a little bit more context because I think Notre Dame could make the playoff and he's healthy and he's really good and finishes in the top 5, but not in the top 3. So I would have to. I'm going to sell that just because I think the Heisman has become so much. It's become so much about numbers, and it's kind of like what we talked about yesterday. It's one of those things, Vince, where I think he's going to put up really good numbers, but will it be like 4,000 passing yards? Like I think Carson Beck's going to put up way better like passing numbers, and people kind of obsess on that.
Quinn Ewers could have a big season.
Yeah,
he's already got a lot of hype.
You could see like one of the running backs from around kind of breaking out. So something along those lines. But I'm going to sell it. I think he would need like a really big number. I'm not saying he shouldn't be in the Heisman voting. I'm just saying, like, I'm trying to look at how the Heisman voting tends to go and who the top guys tend to be.
Yeah.
So, and because there's so many more playoff spots, like I'll say this, Vince, if we were talking about, like the 4-team Heisman vote, the 4-team playoff, and you were to tell me that Notre Dame was going to be in the top 4 of that, I'd be much more willing to buy into that, right? But like, here's the deal. You had LSU last year who had the Heisman Trophy winner. Their quarterback passed for 3,800 yards and rushed for 1,100. He won it. The number 2 guy in the Heisman voting last year, whose team made the playoff, passed for 4,900 yards and had 36 touchdowns and then 3 rushing touchdowns. The number 3 guy, Bo Nix at Oregon, who was also on a very good team, had 4,500 passing yards, 45 touchdowns. And I think he was over about 200 rushing yards. He had 234 rushing yards and 6 more touchdowns. So he had a total of 51 touchdowns last year and only 3 interceptions, right? Like, so let's say that in a 4-team playoff, could I have seen a scenario where that happened? Sure. You say, well, Jordan Travis finished 5th and Jalen Milroe finished 6th and Riley Leonard would have much better numbers than both of those guys. Yeah, again, but that's 5th and 6th, not 1, 2, or 3. There's just offenses that put up just crazy numbers, and some of those guys are going to be on really good teams this year. I mean, Carson Beck threw for over 3,900 yards last year as a first-time starter. I don't think he's going to regress. Like, the schedule is going to be a lot harder, and so maybe he throws for like 37 and runs for 3, something along those lines. So, Georgia's going to get the benefit of the doubt in that situation. Jalen Milroe's probably going to pass for over 3,000 yards this year if he's healthy because of the nature of that offense. So I think he'd probably get more of the benefit of the doubt than Riley Leonard. So it's part of it's kind of a bias of how the process works, bias towards numbers, bias towards some Southern players in the Big Ten. And I think that's where you could maybe have a Notre Dame guy get hurt a little bit, is that regard. Having said that, here's the caveat, Vince. If Notre Dame goes out and in Texas A&M against Florida State and against USC, Riley Leonard just destroys them. He only throws for like 3,300 yards, rushes for 5, has 35 plus touchdowns, but he rips up A&M, rips up Florida State, rips up USC, and impressive Notre Dame wins, and they're 12-0, and then they're in the playoff that way. That's maybe could be enough for him to get to the end of that top 3, if not even all the way at the top.
But the big games are what matters. I mean, that's the point you're making. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
They matter a ton, for sure.
I would love to buy this. I can't even tell you how much I would love to buy this. I really, really, really would. And I think he's got an opportunity to be a finalist in New York, and that varies every year as to how many guys that is, from 3 to 5, depending on the voting and all of that. And I think he has every opportunity to do that. It's all out in front of him. I mean, they've got the schedule to do it. He's got, the playmakers around him to do it. If everybody does what we think they're going to do, go listen to yesterday's show. I think that it could happen, but I don't know that I would bet the farm that it's going to happen. You know what I mean? And that's what this is. This is a buy or sell. And so I think I would probably hold this, because I think this isn't out of the realm of possibility. Like, there is a reality that this takes place, that there is an absolute reality where this takes place. I just think that it would be somewhat difficult to make that happen. So I don't want to sell it completely. So this is where I'm going to use a hold and say, yeah, I could see that happening, but I'm going to wait and see. So I'm going to give this one a hold, Brian. All right. Buy, sell, hold. This is a fun one. The games against Florida State and USC end up being top 10 matchups.
I'm buying the Florida State game being a top 10 matchup. I think at worst they have 1 loss. USC, I'm not sure of. I could see USC being just outside the top 10. And a lot of it has to do with their schedule, Vince. I've said, I think USC is going to be a lot better this year. I think USC could go 9-3 and have a really good year. When you look at their schedule, they play LSU on a neutral field. They play at Michigan, home against Wisconsin, home against Penn State, at Washington, home against Nebraska, at UCLA, and then home against Notre Dame. So against that schedule, I could see them, being 9-2. They'd have to avoid some upsets. But even at 9-2, I don't know if they're quite top 10. I think that if they're 9-2, they're probably like 12th, something like that. They'd have to be, in my opinion, or the other scenario is, Vince, they lose to LSU and Michigan, let's just say early, and then just blow out Wisconsin, beat Penn State convincingly, go on the road, beat a good Washington team. Hopefully Nebraska's good for them. Are there enough good wins on there for them to overcome 2 losses? I don't know that there are, unless, let's say they have an upset loss, but they beat the good team. So I don't know that that's going to be a top 10 battle, but it'll be close. As I've said this before, Vince, I'm going to continue riding this train. I think USC is going to be a lot better than people think.
Sure.
And yeah, their schedule's hard, but it's not a gauntlet going into the Notre Dame game. So I definitely think they'll be a top 20 team. I'm pretty confident in that, but I do think their schedule's a little bit harder, and they're not a good enough team, in my opinion, to run the table against the schedule they play. Does that make sense? I think they're going to be a lot better, but this isn't going to be like a vintage USC team where all of a sudden, they're out there and they're just beating, really good top 5 teams on the road like the 16 team did. I don't see them being that. I just think they're going to be a 9 potential 10-win team when it's all said and done. So I am higher on that USC team. A lot of it's we're going to know early. We're going to know by the end of their 3rd game if I'm right about that. And not even about the record, but just how well do they play against USC or against LSU and Michigan State, right? That's going to be a big question. And if they can win one of those 2 games, then I'll be right. If they lose those 2 games, but they're super competitive games, then it's going to be, they held up well, Vince, but here's the big key. How do they respond to that then? Okay, so then you come out of that Michigan loss and you've got 4 straight games that aren't going to be easy. Wisconsin at home, at Minnesota, home against Penn State, at Maryland. Well, actually 6 straight games, and you're home against Rutgers and at Washington. So, and Rutgers reminds me a lot of the Utah team that beat them last year. Run the ball, really stingy defense, quarterback position's a problem. That's kind of how it was for Utah last year once Cameron Rising went down. So, yeah, we'll see. I'm going to buy and then buy Florida State, sell USC. So if it's all in one, I'm going to sell it because of that reason.
I think Florida State, I'm not going to rehash everything that you just said because I do agree with you. I was going to say yes to Florida State, no to USC. Florida State could very well be undefeated coming into Notre Dame. They could also have 1 loss. If they have 1 loss, they're still top 10 because I think they're going to start off high and then they'll maintain that ranking throughout. And then Notre Dame will dash their hopes and dreams, and it'll be wonderful. USC, though, like you said, there's just too many question marks about you. It's the last game of the season, and to say that they're going to be at the top 10 is too much for me. So it's a sell for me as well.
Well, and to your point about Florida State, Vince, their schedule, their toughest games are Georgia Tech on a neutral field, at SMU, Clemson at home, at Miami, home against North Carolina.
Challenging, but not murderer's row.
Challenging-ish.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. It just depends. Part of it depends on how good is Miami this year. If Miami's same old, then they've really only got 1 real tough game.
And you think SMU Clemson is going to surprise some people? With
I do.
Yeah,
I do. Right. Do I think it's going to be enough for them to win? No, but it'll be like the Oklahoma game last year, where SMU gave Oklahoma a game, but at the end of the day, they still don't have enough athletes to win that game.
Right. Get it.
Yeah.
Profo.
Professor O.
Professor O. Yep. That sounds
Professor
like an X-Man character. Okay. Buy, sell, hold. No opponent on Notre Dame's 24 schedule makes the playoff. Double or nothing. No 24 Notre Dame opponent finishes the season in the top 20. I buy both of these.
Yeah, he is definitely buying into what I believe to be a very misguided view on the schedule. Yeah. And I don't quite get that. I think there'll be at least 1 Notre Dame team in the top 20. Look, we just went over Florida State's schedule. If they lose 3 games, they're still probably a top 20 team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. So I think they'll have a shot to be in the top 20. I think Louisville will have a shot to finish in the top 20. They've got to make some improvements in some other areas, but you look at their schedule this year. It's a good schedule, but it's not murderer's row. You've got Austin Peay, Jacksonville State, Georgia Tech, at Notre Dame. Let's say that's a loss. Then home against SMU, at Virginia, home against Miami, at BC, at Clemson. And then they finish at Stanford, home against Pitt, and at Kentucky. They could be going to that Kentucky game 9-2 with losses to Notre Dame on the road and Clemson on the road, and then a win at home over SMU and a win at home over Miami. So, I mean, it's perfectly conceivable. And then if they can beat Kentucky on the road, something they have not done a good job of in recent years, then you'll have a chance. That's a team that you look at and say, that's a top 20 team. Then you got to ask yourself, okay, is their quarterback going to be healthy? Is, by that point in time in the season, all that type of stuff. But I mean, I think Louisville certainly has a chance to be there. And also I'm telling you, I could see Texas A&M dropping a couple games early, but I think by the end of the year, it's going to be a really good football team.
Yeah.
Really competitive football team. So I could see them being in there too. And we just got done talking about USC. I could see USC being in the top 20. Now, so no Notre Dame opponent on their schedule makes the playoff. That I'm going to sell I'm going to sell that because I think Florida State finishes at worst 10-2.
Right.
Right. So, but I have them being basically 11-1 in the regular season, then losing to Clemson in the ACC title game. And then I think both of those teams make it. I think Clemson makes it as the automatic, and then Florida State makes it at 11-2 because they'll have a regular season win over Clemson.
Sure.
The team that beat them in the ACC title game.
Which will matter. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I could see them going, I could see them being that 11-1 being a loss to Notre Dame, who we view as a playoff team as well. So I'm gonna sell that. So I'm gonna sell that no team makes the playoff. Now I'll say this: if Florida State's not as good as we think they're going to be, then that becomes a buy. Because I don't think A&M's a playoff team. I don't think Louisville's a playoff team. I don't think USC's a playoff team. So if Florida State's not as good as we think, then now, because it really comes down to how do you view Florida State,
right?
That really it's what it comes down to for me. And I think Florida State's going to be better than people think.
There's an outside chance that USC is a playoff team, an outside chance, and that's because of the conference that they're in. And I feel like they get the benefit of the doubt an awful lot. And so does a 3-loss USC team have an opportunity to get into the playoff? We've never had a 12-team playoff, so I'm just curious as to how those 3rd and 4th place SEC Big Ten teams are viewed at the end of the day. So I think USC has an outside chance of getting in. I think Florida State has the best chance of getting in as far as what Notre Dame's opponents are. And so I would sell the top one just off the fact that I think 2 teams have the chance of getting into the playoff. The top 20 thing I think is nutty. I think there's going to be multiple top 20 teams at the end of the day. And, this is not the cakewalk schedule that a lot of people think. And I'm not going to rehash everything that Brian just said, but
because we broke it down last week. Yeah.
I think there's going to be multiple teams in the top 20. So, because I don't think the top
at least
20.
2.
Yeah. Right,
well, the other thing you got to think about, Professor, is where we're coming from, in that we both believe that this is going to be a very chaotic year where teams are just going to kind of beat each other up.
Right.
And that's going to factor into the conversation as well, because we view it as, where Notre Dame's going to go out there and be really good, but a lot of teams they're going to be really good, are going to have 1 to 2 losses. There's going to be a lot of 3-4 loss teams. So I think that's going to factor into it as well. I actually think Louisville has a better shot to make the playoff than USC.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The reason I say that is because I could see a scenario, because Louisville doesn't have to play Florida State. They have to play at Clemson, but then they get Miami at home. They don't play North Carolina. Their ACC schedule outside of playing at Clemson and then Miami at home is not daunting. It's Georgia Tech, it's SMU, it's at Virginia, it's at Boston College, at Stanford, and home against Pitt. They get most of the bottom feeders in the conference outside of Clemson and Miami. I could see a scenario where they, get into the ACC title game with 2 losses, one being a non-conference Notre Dame and then the other being at Clemson. And, who knows what can happen. They were in the ACC title game last year. So, I think they could get in as the at-large, as the automatic. I don't think they get in, Vince, with as an at-large. But I'm simply saying I could see them winning the ACC. Like let's say they lose to Clemson in the regular season, and then they play them in a rematch and win the rematch. Right. Gotcha. And Florida State's not in, because let's say Florida State gets upset by Clemson and then they beat them. Or, let's say they play Florida State. I think Louisville matches up pretty well against Florida State. They've got good DBs that can cover. They have a chance to have a pretty good defensive line. The question can be is, can they score enough to beat them? And that was the issue last year, is they couldn't score enough to beat Florida State, even though they kept Florida State's offense in check because Florida State didn't have their quarterback. But I could see something like that happening. I just think for USC, even if USC ends up going like 10-2 in the regular season and their only losses are, let's say they beat Michigan on the road and they beat Penn State at home, and their 2 losses are to LSU and Notre Dame. They're playing in the Big Ten title game. I don't see them beating Oregon or Ohio State. That's my
agreed.
Now, I think they have a better shot against Oregon than against Ohio State, but I don't think they beat either one of those teams.
I think
Louisville, I think, would have a better shot at winning the ACC title game than I think USC would in that scenario.
There's going to be a lot of love, though, for whoever loses the conference championship games.
Unless it's a scenario like I just presented, where they didn't have to play the 2 best teams in their league and they got smacked outside their conference both times.
Sure.
Now they've got a 3rd loss.
Sure.
Now they're 10-3. Now they're really on the cusp of getting that at large.
I think that's where the conversation is like, well, no, we got to put all 3 of them in. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's where, well, this is the Big Ten and we got to get all 3.
I don't know that USC would get that benefit of that doubt because they didn't play either Ohio State or Oregon. And then whoever they did play in the title game, they'd get smacked. And I think the 2 non-conference losses would be given it. Now, to your point, Vince, if they beat USC, if they beat LSU, and let's just say they lose to Michigan in the 3rd game, and then run the table and then lose a heartbreaker to an undefeated or 1-loss Notre Dame team at home, go to the Big Ten title game, and then take Ohio State down to the wire, Oregon down to the wire, I think they could have a case because they'd have that really good non-conference win. I just don't think beating Michigan on the road this year is going to carry the same sway at the end of the year. The Penn State win at home might be the more impressive win.
Yeah, no, I agree with that because I think Penn State's a better team than Michigan this year. So, yeah, I agree with that. Domer Grizz, buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame will have at least 2 wide receivers earn at least 3rd-team All-America honors from at least 3 of the 5 official All-America lists. So that means unanimous All-American. That's what that means, right?
No, it's only if you're 1st team.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to be on the 1st team.
Consensus. It would be consensus.
But you still have to be on the 1st team.
Okay.
They don't have like a consensus. Like Howard Cross was a 2nd-teamer on 3 of the main 5, but he didn't, or maybe 4 of the main 5, but he's not a consensus All-American because it's only 1st team.
Okay, so
you have to be on the 1st team for like at least 3 for consensus.
So it would be a quote-unquote consensus 3rd-team All-America. Yeah, that's what they're looking for. Okay.
I don't see that.
Yeah, I have a hard time with that too.
I don't know that there'll be 1. I'm definitely not buying 2, so I'm selling that. I've said it before, again, trying to be consistent. I just think the ball's going to get spread around a lot.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be really good players. Exactly. It's stat driven.
Yeah, you really need stats. And I don't know that anybody's going to come up with the stats needed to be on an All-America list because, as you mentioned in a previous question, there's going to be teams out there that are going to put up just ridiculous stats.
Yeah.
And All-America lists, it matters if your team is good, but at the same time, if your stats are out of this world, it doesn't matter, especially offensively. And so I think there's going to be some wide receivers on there that you may never even have heard of that hit that 3rd-team list just because their stats are crazy.
I'll say this, Vince, if this ends up being wrong, or I'll say if Notre Dame gets 1 guy, a receiver, on a 3rd-team All-American list, this team is going to be flipping nasty. Because he's going to be over 1,000 yards, and he's going to be really, really impactful. So, because I have to go back and look. I don't know that Will Fuller was even he was a 2nd-team All-American in 2015. That's it. Like he wasn't even an All-American that year, and he had really good numbers. So yeah, it's
that's tough.
Yeah, I just don't. I'm selling that. But I'll say if there is one on that team, I'm gonna tell you that right now, man. They are gonna be I'll just say this, like to your point, Vince, the whole, like Will Fuller being not like Will Fuller to me, if you look at the 2015 season, he was a 2nd-team All-American, and I'm going to pull up some stats here to make a point. And they had 2 other guys that were on the first team ahead of him that consist that year. One was Corey Coleman from Baylor. He had 74 catches for 1,363 yards and 20 touchdowns. The other was Josh Doxson, who had 79 catches, 1,327 yards and 14 touchdowns. Will Fuller had over 60 catches and over 1,200 yards. Those guys were 1st-teamers over Will Fuller. Why? There's only one reason why. They had just better numbers. Yeah. And it wasn't even by that much. It just was better numbers. And Will was a 2nd-team player. There's no way that, with all due respect to Corey Coleman and Josh Doxson, who were 1st-round picks, they were not better college football players than Will Fuller was. They just played in systems that threw the mess out of the football.
Correct.
Because that was Corey Coleman played in that air raid, our Prowse air raid. And so to your point, Vince, and that was Will Fuller having 60, I think it was like 65 catches, I believe, or it was like 68 catches, 64, something like, let me pull up his stats. But he had over 1,200 yards and 15 touchdowns. And I think it was like 64, 65 catches, somewhere around there. 62 catches for 1,258 yards and 14 touchdowns. And he was money. He played well in big games. Played great against USC, had the game-winning touchdown pass against Virginia, had the game-winning touchdown pass against Temple, had 8 catches against Texas. He was excellent that year. But even then, the guys with better numbers were ranked higher than he was.
Exactly.
So, I mean, could you imagine if Notre Dame has a guy that even sniffs Will Fuller's numbers this year? I don't know how you stop this offense. I really don't.
Well, and the other small piece of this thing, Brian, is Notre Dame doesn't generally have All-America wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's schools out there that produce wide receivers at the All-America level because of stats. And you automatically look at those schools for All-America guys. You know what I'm saying? So, like, Notre Dame puts up All-Americans at offensive line, at tight end. You know what I mean? Like, they're not known for their wide receivers. And so somebody at Notre Dame is just going to have to absolutely go off to get any kind of recognition, in my opinion. And I have a hard time seeing one, and I definitely don't see two. So it's a sell.
Good stuff.
Absolutely. Wade Garrett, buy, sell, hold. I can take over Akron in NCAA football 25 and lead them to the college football playoffs.
I'm going to buy it because you go in there preseason, you update the roster, you make a bunch of your guys over 90s, and then you go win.
You're updating all the guys.
Yeah. Turn all your starters into 90-plus guys, and then you're good. So,
Brian Driscoll's your quarterback, and it's just dominating the Zips. Just take it.
I don't know, man. I'd need a pretty big NIL deal to go to Akron. I'm just saying. Have you ever been to Akron? You need to pay me a lot of money to go live in Akron for like 5 minutes. Yes,
that's hilarious.
You would.
That's
hilarious. But yeah, you can do that. You can do that. Now, in all seriousness, are you going to take Akron and then you're just that good of a player? Okay, if you turn it all the way to like rookie mode, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. But no, Akron's roster's not very good. It's not very good.
No, the Zips are not contending, really, unfortunately. All right, Ball-Peen Shillelagh. Buy, sell, hold. Independence Day cookout specials. Bratwursts are far superior than hot dogs.
I'm selling that just because I don't really like bratwurst that much.
That's a huge buy for me. I love a good brat. I'm a big fan of the brats. And hot dogs are just boring to me. And once you start, stuffing hot dogs with like cheese and weird stuff, then that's not a hot dog anymore. You're trying to morph a hot dog into something that it's not. So if a hot dog can't stand on its own 2 legs, then it's not a hot dog anymore.
I mean, so you eat brats plain?
Yes, I do actually. Maybe some onions on top, but you know what I mean. But like nothing stuffed in. Like I don't like cheese stuffed or anything like that.
No, I don't like that either.
Yeah.
So like I don't
taste.
Love hot dogs. I have some personal reasons why I don't necessarily love hot dogs, but I'll eat a hot dog at every home game at Notre Dame just because it's one of the
their
few
hot
things
dogs are good
to eat. Like I was like, look, I went to a period of time where let's just say this: I ate a lot of hot dogs in high school for reasons that I don't really care to get into right now. But when I went to college and my 20s, I'm just like, I'm not eating hot dogs. I'm not eating hot dogs. I'm not eating hot dogs. Then my wife took me to New York City. And she's like, you got to get a Sabrett hot dog. And so I was like, okay, whatever. I'll try your freaking hot dogs. She's like, they're the best hot dogs ever. And she was going through all this stuff. And I was like, whatever. It is what it is. I'll try her freaking hot dog just to leave her alone. So you got to do a Sabrett hot dog, street hot dog. So like, I'm someone who doesn't eat hot dogs, period. And she wants me to eat one from a freaking little stand that some dude has on the corner in New York City. Like, whatever. Oh my gosh, they were the best things I ever had in my life. Like they just like the juices just explode in your mouth. They were and just a hot dog and a bun. I don't put anything else on a hot dog. Yeah. But I will say this though, a good chili cheese dog is a phenomenal thing. I don't know anyone around here that makes a good one, but like we used to get like Coney dogs when I was a kid. There's this like root beer stand down the street from my house. This is back when they had cool things like that before everything became like, corporate things and all that kind of stuff.
There's a great root beer stand right down the road here, man.
Do they sell Coney dogs?
I don't know, but it's an A&W.
Okay, that's a corporate thing though.
No. This one is they home make their root beer.
Gotcha.
They sell it to you in a 2-gallon jug, like a milk carton.
Gotcha.
Like it's legit.
Yeah. But this place had like these foot-long coney dogs, and I would punish those when I was a kid, man. Punish those as a kid. So,
gotcha.
But yeah. So, but I've never really had a bratwurst that I cared much for. I'm open to it, because I mean, if everybody says it's good, but I just haven't had one that I've enjoyed. But I'd rather have neither. I'd rather go burgers.
If you give me the option, it's always a burger.
Especially my burgers.
Always a burger, and always Brian's burger. For so many reasons.
Hey, I heard there's a place. Angela said there's some place in town. I got to remember the name of it, but they have smash burgers. She went there the other day. It's
really
Nash or something like that.
Huh. Never heard
it's
of it.
over off University. It's like a new place, and she said their burgers are really good. So they have smash burgers. So they're really good. So
noted.
We'll have to give it a shot.
Noted.
This is not clicking over here for me. Give me a second.
I see your mouse. It's in the neighborhood.
Yeah, give me a second here, Vince. I don't know why this thing is not coming up here real quick. So let me try this again.
I actually have to go clean my grates on my grill. It's on my to-do list for tomorrow. All right. Christopher Crosby, buy, sell, hold. USC and LSU both made significant defensive staff changes this season. Well, that's just a statement of fact. Buy, sell, hold. LSU made the better overall staff changes, but USC will have the better defense for the season.
Well, I'm selling that because I don't think LSU made the better overall staff changes. Like, I like the guy they hired. They hired a really good D-line coach in Brad Davis. They hired a good defensive coordinator. They got the guy Baker from Missouri. But I think DeAnton Lynn is just as good of a defensive coordinator hire. Now, no, he doesn't have the track record, but the job he did last year with UCLA was nothing short of exceptional. But I also think you got to look at it. So you could say, okay, let's say LSU had slightly better hires from the standpoint of, the D-line coach and the defensive coordinator. Okay. So, well, my counter to that would be, okay, that's fine. But, they got Corey Raymond in the secondary. That's what a lot of people are going to look at. That was obviously a good hire. But, my thing is, I also say you look at what USC did, and they went out and got, what's his name? Doug Belk to come in and coach for them. So, I mean, like, LSU made great all-around hires, but I think USC can match them. That's my thing. I really think that USC can match LSU hire for hire. I really like the hires that they did. I do. And so I'm going to go with it being a wash from a defensive coordinator standpoint. And I'm going to go and by the way, USC also went out, by the way, and hired North Dakota State's head coach as their linebackers coach as well. Guy that won 2 national championships as a Division I FCS head coach. So I'm just going to go a slight advantage to USC as far as I think the defense is going to be. I would give a slight advantage coaching hire wise to USC, but I think you could argue it's a wash. But I do agree at the second part that USC will have better defense. And the reason I say that is, Vince, they just got better players. I mean, LSU made some great hires this offseason when it came to the defensive staff. I'll give Brian Kelly a lot of credit. What I'm saying there is not at all meant to poo-poo what Brian Kelly did from a coaching. I think he had a great offseason with defensive coaching hires. I think bringing Corey Raymond back was huge. I think getting Coach Davis, Brad Davis from LSU, they got him from Texas. Huge hire. I think the Baker hire, D coordinator, is a very good hire. I just think USC's were slightly better. That's all. But LSU did a great job. But the difference is I think USC did a lot more in the portal to rebuild their roster. A lot more. You look at what USC did or LSU did in the transfer portal. They only got 9 guys. They got a receiver, a punter, and a quarterback, AJ Swan, and another receiver. So did very well at receiver. But defensively, they got Jair Brown, a cornerback from Ohio State, who never played Ohio State, and I didn't think was that good coming out of high school. They got 2 sort of okay defensive linemen. They got the one kid from, undersized kid from Grand Valley State, and they got a kid that transferred from Wisconsin who's an okay player. They got Austin Osbury, who's Jaden's older brother, who's a solid player, but didn't play a whole lot at Auburn. And then they got a really good pickup from Texas A&M. They got Jordan Gilbert. That's it. That's all they got. USC completely revamped their entire starting defense with portal. I mean, their entire starting secondary with portal guys.
Yeah.
that are good football players. So I just think USC had better talent to begin with. They were just poorly coached. LSU was poorly coached and didn't have very good talent, in my opinion, on defense. And most of the good guys they had are gone. They had 3 defensive tackles and get drafted in the NFL draft. So I think USC will certainly have a better defense. I think both staffs did a great job with coaching hires in the offseason. I just like USC's a little bit better. That's all. So, but it's not meant at all to take away from the job I think Brian Kelly did. I give him credit. He had a very good offseason when it comes to coaching hires.
Christopher Crosby, buy, sell, hold. If Riley Leonard matches the numbers of Seth Hennigan of Memphis last season, Notre Dame will have a top 3 offense and a legitimate chance to win a championship. And I guess these were his numbers: 38, 183 yards, 32 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 274 rushing yards, and 5 touchdowns.
Well, yeah, Vince, I'll say that. Yeah, here's first of all, this goes back to the earlier question. If Riley Leonard puts up those type of numbers,
then he'll be top 3 in the Heisman voting.
He'll have a good shot. Yeah, I still think he'll have a little bit more than 5 rushing touchdowns, but even if we just go with the premise. But if Riley Leonard throws for that many yards and only rushes for 274 yards, it means Notre Dame's run game is phenomenal because they don't need him to run.
Right. And he's just standing back there just picking people
right.
up. Just,
I mean, if he only has 274 rushing yards as in a healthy season, Vince, there's no way that doesn't – I mean, that Mike Denbrock's a smart guy. There's no way that if the running game's not rolling, they don't use Riley Leonard in the run game. So if he only rushed for 274 yards, that means the run game is nasty without him, which means what? It means the O-line's really good.
Yes.
And now he's also thrown for 3,800 yards. That means he's just sitting back and picking people apart.
Yep.
How do you defend that team? So, yeah, in that case, they'd be a top 3 offense and would absolutely have a legitimate chance to win a championship. There's no question about that. Yes.
Honestly, the only number I don't like here is the interceptions. I think that's a little high. But if you're throwing for 32 touchdowns and 3,800 yards, maybe it doesn't matter.
I mean, that's less than 1 a game.
Yeah, which is true. Yeah. But I'd like that number to be a little bit lower.
Yeah, sure. I can live with 32 and 9 if it means you're throwing close to 4,000 yards. But, yeah, it just depends on, you just want to avoid that one game where you had 3. That's the thing you'd want to avoid.
I do think the combination of passing touchdowns and rushing touchdowns is about where he's going to end up. I just don't know that I would put that split the way it is. You know what I'm saying? Like, it might be a few less passing and then a few more rushing, but I think the total might be just about there, to be honest. So, and honestly, the total of 3,800 plus 274, I could buy that as well, but I would just have less on the passing and more on the rushing. So, yeah, from a total, if you just added those up and you said, this many total yards and then this many touchdowns and 9 interceptions, I'm like, yeah, that's probably pretty accurate, So, yeah, they will have a lot of success if that is the case. So I'll buy that as well.
Agree. I don't know. There we go. Okay.
Hey. Whoop.
It's not being very fun today.
Irish Texans 73, buy, sell, hold. Sam Hartman will continue the Washington trend of the team's quote-unquote other rookie quarterback having a better NFL career than the guy picked in the top 3, this time with Jaden Daniels following 1994 with Heath Schuler and Gus Frerotte, and 2012 with Robert Griffin III and Kirk Cousins.
Well, I'm gonna sell that. I just, first of all, I believe those other 2 guys got drafted. So I think Gus Frerotte was a 7th round pick, and I think Kirk Cousins was drafted as well, like 5th or 6th round, I believe.
Almost positive Kirk Cousins was drafted.
Yeah. So I just no. And the other thing too is, I like Sam Hartman. I do. I don't think he's as good of a quarterback as what Kirk Cousins was. You know what I mean? As far as just talent, I just don't think he's that type of quarterback. Kirk Cousins was a 4th round pick.
Yeah, there you go.
So, I mean, yeah, I'm selling that. He may end up being the starter. Number one, I think Jaden Daniels has got a chance to be a solid. I don't think Jaden Daniels, to me, is going to play like the number 2 overall draft pick or number
something
4.
like that. I mean, it was top. Yeah.
Yeah. I know that Drake May was 3. I believe that Jaden Daniels was 2, correct? To Washington. He was the number 2 pick.
That sounds right.
I don't think he's going to play like a number 2 pick. I don't. I think he's going to be a solid quarterback, though. And in that regard, he'll be better than Heath Schuler. But here's the thing. Robert Griffin took Washington to the playoffs before he got hurt.
It was just an injury situation.
It was an injury, and then his mind got jacked up. Like, he tried to convince himself he was a thrower instead of just leaning into what he was.
Yeah.
And then there were some issues with, those other things. But no, I think Jaden Daniels is going to be a good, solid NFL quarterback. I do. As long as they can put a good team around him.
Sure. I love Sam Hartman. I think he's a great guy, all of those different things. I just think his career track in the NFL is going to be as just a solid backup. Just a solid, he'll get some starts here and there. He'll keep your team in the game. He will be a kid who is always prepared for, to be the starter, all of those different things. I just think that that's his ceiling, though. That's who Sam Hartman is. And you make a hell of a living as a perennial backup quarterback. There's no doubt about it. But I just don't know. I have a hard time believing that he's going to be better than Jaden Daniels. And again, I guess that depends on what your definition of better is, right? Is Jaden Daniels going to lead Washington to the playoffs and do all of those things? I don't know the answer to that. I just don't know that any team is going to be like Sam Hartman. That's our starting quarterback, going into a season and then for multiple seasons and get a contract of that ilk. I just don't see that being the case. So
Agreed.
even from a low level NFL team, you know what I mean?
Agree.
You pick your low level team, whoever you want to select. It'd be like the Cardinals. Yeah, Sam Hartman's our man. Here's a 5-year deal. I don't see that being the case.
Agree.
All right, Joe Allen 72. Buy, sell, hold. If Notre Dame is 11-0 going into the USC game, it is most likely that the game's outcome will have more of an impact on USC's playoff road than Notre Dame's.
Well,
that's a good question.
Yeah, it depends on how you look at it. So first of all, I think I'm going to sell that. The reason I'm going to sell that is because I don't think that game is going to have as much of an impact on USC. And here's what I mean by that. I just don't see USC being in a situation where they're a 1-loss or better team. I think they're going to be a 2-loss team that no matter what they do to Notre Dame, their chance is we had 3 losses, but 2 of them were non-conference, so we're tied for first. We got to beat Ohio State next week, or we got to beat Oregon next week in the Big Ten title game. That's going to be their path. I don't think the Notre Dame game is going to have a whole lot to do with that because I don't think they're a team that's going to beat Notre Dame and all of a sudden they're a playoff team because then they go out the next week and then they get beat and it'll be a little bit tougher for me. I think getting to the Big Ten title game is going to be the biggest thing for them.
And they'll know that going in.
Right. And what do they do there? Now, for Notre Dame, if they're 11-0, I think this is a huge game for Notre Dame because they're jockeying for that number 5 spot.
That locks them in if they're undefeated.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be very, very important for them. I don't see how Notre Dame is not the 5 seed if they're undefeated.
Right.
I don't see how they aren't.
Because if they get that loss, and it's the most recent game in memory for the committee and for pundits and the whole thing, right? If they lose that game to USC, now there's a chink in the armor, right? And you're going to see all kinds of non-conference winning teams vying for that number 5 spot, and they'll have a legitimate, claim on that spot because your most recent memory of Notre Dame is them losing to USC, a USC team who had 2 losses potentially, right? And so, yeah, I think there'll be more on the line for Notre Dame because if they're 12-0, I think they lock in that number 5 spot, and it's just everybody just sitting back and watching the conference championship games, knowing where Notre Dame is going to end up and wondering who they're going to welcome to South Bend, that in 2 weeks. And so a lot of stress will be taken off of Notre Dame fans and players and coaches and everybody else if they win that game, last game of the season.
Agree.
Oh, here we go. Buy, sell.
Joe's got a couple.
Oh, okay. I was like, ooh, it's the same one. Anyway, Joe Allen, here we go. Buy, sell, hold. With the conference realignments, there is a greater chance of a Big Ten or SEC getting in a 9-3 team into the playoff than the ACC or Big 12. I mean, a lot of it's relative, right?
Are we talking about an at-large team?
Yes. Yeah.
No, I'm going to sell that. If you'd have just said Big 12, maybe I could have gone with that. But listen, if Florida State wins the ACC, and you're sitting there with a 10-2 Clemson or an 11-2 Clemson, who then goes and loses, or like an 11-1 Clemson goes and loses to, Florida State. I think 11-2 Clemson, because who will have beaten either? Because like for Clemson to be 11-1, they have to have won either they play Georgia and Florida State on the road. They will have to have beaten one of them, and then they lose in a rematch. Or Clemson sitting there at 10-2, Florida State sitting there at 11-1. Clemson wins the rematch, and now they're both 11-2. They're both in. So I think that there's this notion that the ACC gets no respect, and I understand it, but last year was an anomaly. The whole thing with the quarterback being hurt and all that kind of stuff, it was an anomaly. It's not normally how that has gone. I think the ACC will get respect. I mean, in the last 11 years, the ACC's won 3 national championships by the 2 teams we'd be talking about. Now, if it's a Miami-type team and Florida State or Clemson is down, okay, that's a different story. But if we're talking about an at-large bid, I still think the number 2 team in the ACC will still have a better shot than an SEC team that's 9-3 or a Big Ten team that's 9-3. And I don't know that anybody in those leagues has a strong enough schedule, especially the Big Ten, to be able to say we're going to get in at 9-3. I mean, the whole thing about Penn State being overrated is they're overrated, but it's partly because they're like 11-1, 10-2 every year because they play a soft schedule. They only have like really 2 tough games all year. So I think that's more of the issue that I have with that. So
let me rephrase this just slightly.
Mm-hmm.
Would a 9-3 Big Ten or SEC team get in over the 3rd ACC?
Oh, in that case, most likely, yeah. But again, it would depend on what the record is and what the non-conference looks like. So let's say Clemson finished. Let's say Miami, Florida State, and Clemson are both really, really good, and Miami and Florida State somehow with tiebreakers gets in, and Clemson's sitting there at 10-2 as the number 2 team in the SEC or the ACC, or number 3 team in the ACC, and they have a non-conference win over Georgia. Or maybe they take Georgia down to the wire and lose by a field goal late. I could see a 10-2 Clemson at number 3 getting in over a 9-3 SEC team that's probably the 5th or 6th best team in their league. Yes.
Okay.
Now, if that 9-3 team is Georgia against the schedule they play this year, maybe not, because then they may have a head-to-head win over Clemson.
Right.
But so context would matter. But I mean, if we're just talking about them getting their second place team in, over a 9-3 team from the Big Ten or SEC, I don't see that happening. Now, to your point, to your question, Vince, put it this way: if we're talking about a 9-3 Big Ten or SEC against a 9-3 SEC, ACC, or Big 12, they're going to take the Big Ten SEC
no
team
chance.
almost every time.
Agree with that.
Unless there's some sort of head-to-head that would give the ACC or Big 12 team the head up. So let's say Georgia goes 9-3, Clemson goes 9-3, Clemson beat Georgia.
Yeah.
Okay, Clemson probably get in that scenario. That would be the only way I think that would happen. No, the ACC and Big 12 teams are always going to have a better record than the SEC and Big 10 teams are going against. They're very rarely going to get everything, all things being equal, go with the SEC, ACC, or Big 12 team. That's not going to happen all that much, in my opinion. Good. That was a good proposal. It's a good thought on that one. Also a new one.
Oh, I know. I was pausing on purpose.
Okay. Sorry.
So Joe Allen 72.
Pause again so you can cut this part out.
Joe Allen 72. Buy, sell, hold. Florida State finally announces its exit from the ACC sometime this summer, creating another chaotic shift in all the conferences.
Well, I buy that. Look, I think Florida State has to announce sometime. I think it's in like July or August is when the deadline is for them to announce they're getting out in order to leave for 2025. So like if they have a deadline coming up either in July or August, that if they don't announce by then they can't get out by 25. They'd be locked in through 25. I think they want out. I think they're going to announce their intention to get out. Now, it's the lawsuits will still continue. The court battles will still continue, but they will announce their decision to get out. Now, they can rescind that down the road if they lose the court case and they don't think they can afford the payout. But I think ultimately what happens is there's some sort of settlement, and I'm going to hold off my opinion on that until we get to a future buy, sell, hold that's going to speak to this. But I do think Florida State and I think Clemson are both going to announce this summer that they're leaving they're leaving the ACC. And if that happens, it wouldn't shock me if a couple other schools follow suit. North Carolina and NC State, because they passed a law in North Carolina, I believe it's been signed, that basically if North Carolina leaves, whoever takes North Carolina would have to take NC State. I believe they're a package deal. You may see Virginia opt out. I do think Miami could start a domino effect in the ACC. I do, if they both opt out this summer, and it'll get hectic. I'm just curious, like, what's going to happen? Like, will the Big Ten and SEC eat those teams up? Will the Big 12 take some? Well, I don't know how.
I feel like they're all going to be making this move without a landing spot.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe there's stuff behind the scenes that I'm obviously not aware of. I'm going to sell just because I don't want it to happen. I'll be the Pollyanna of the group, and I'm fine with that.
I agree with you. I don't want it to happen. I don't want it to happen at all.
Yeah.
I would love it if Florida State had to go back to being an independent.
There you go.
That'd be great.
Right.
That'd be great. And then if that were true, if I was Notre Dame and Florida State said, hey, we're going to go independent, we're going to sign some TV deal with whoever. If I'm Notre Dame, I'm saying, cool, right now, boom, we are signing a 10-year contract with you. Because I think it'd be good for Notre Dame if more teams went independent. I think it would weaken some of the hold that the TV networks have over the conferences.
Sure.
If more schools could somehow get independent deals to go in, to do that, I think that'd be awesome. Be awesome. This is really ticking me off today, Vince.
I hear the clicking, and I'm not seeing.
Yeah, like I don't know what the heck is like. It's being really dumb today, and it's really ticking me off.
Buy, sell, hold from Ball Peen.
Real quick, there's several from Ball Peen Shillelagh, so when you see me switch through, you're still going to see him.
Gotcha.
So I think there's 4 in this one.
Okay, cool. So Ball Peen Shillelagh, the first one. Buy, sell, hold in 8 years from now. Oh my gosh, 8 years. That's like an eternity. We will look back and think, number one, the quarterback succession from Riley to CJ to Deuce mirrored Clemson's QB success from Taj Boyd to Watson to Trevor Lawrence. Credit to ICU-RN with Irish Luck on the boards for this concept.
This is a really interesting one. So
wouldn't that be great, though?
From Riley Leonard to CJ to Deuce mirrors that. Yeah, because in this scenario, it actually kind of tracks really well because Taj Boyd never won a title at Clemson, but they were really good during his tenure, and they started to get some of those big wins. Like everybody says, and I think even Dabo said that they became like the beating Notre Dame in 2015 was the turning point for that program. And I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with Dabo on that. I think the turning point in their program was when they beat Ohio State in 2014 or 13. And then the following year in 2014, even though they lost 4 games that year, beating South Carolina. Because up to that point in time, South Carolina had dominated them. And then earlier that year in 2014, they took Florida State down to the wire in a time when Florida State was dominating them. I think that game against and they would have had a better record in 2014 if Deshaun Watson didn't get hurt early in the season, because that was the year after Taj. But Taj leading them to the win over Ohio State in 2013, to me, and then the year before they beat LSU in a I think it was the Chick-fil-A Bowl in a real big win. So I think those two, and that was a year after LSU had played Bama for the title. I think those 2 wins were what really turned the tide for Clemson and allowed them to go get Deshaun Watson, to even land him, and then get down that process. So, like, to me, Deshaun's the first one to bring him a title, but to me, Taj Boyd's the one that really got that program turned around as a quarterback. That's how the role I see Riley Leonard being this year. I don't know that Notre Dame's going to win a title, but I think that he's going to be the guy that makes that first big run, gets them some of those big wins that we've been waiting for from Notre Dame fans and all that. And then CJ takes it over the hump like Deshaun Watson did. And then Deuce comes in and he does the same thing. So, yeah, I'll buy that. I could definitely see that. I'll buy that.
I want to buy this so bad, so I'm going to. This is with the heart right here. Not that there's not some potential facts to go along with it, right? I mean, we are projecting. Obviously, that's what we do. But, man, would I love this to be the case, because that just means this is going to be a pretty sweet 8-year run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it certainly will be.
And I'm on board with that. Believe me, I am on board with that. I can't even tell you how much. All right. Another a peek into the crystal ball here from Ballpeen. Buy, sell, hold 8 years from now. We will look back and think Notre Dame's path to winning a national championship could be seen as a balance between the way that Clemson and Michigan did so.
No, because I think it would be more like what Clemson did.
Yeah,
I don't have a lot of respect for how Michigan won. I'm sorry, I just don't. I respect the coach that Jim Harbaugh was, toughness wise, X's and O's wise, but I do think they cheated their way to a championship. I do. And now, do I think that them cheating is why their O-line was so dominant? Or no, I don't think that, but I definitely think they got advantages by cheating. I just flat out do. Yeah. And so, no, I don't respect that. I also think they got advantages by playing relatively soft schedules every year. I do. Clemson to me is more the path, because Clemson did a great job of, they landed some top players. They really elevated their overall skill talent, but then also were great evaluators to where they would go find the 3-star kid. Travis Etienne was a 3-star by one of the services. Isaiah Simmons was a 3-star recruit. So yeah, they got the 5-star, the big time quarterbacks. They got the highly ranked skill players like, Justin Ross and T. Higgins and Trayvon Mullins and AJ Terrell. But then Dexter Lawrence was a big time recruit, but then they had some D linemen that were really good that weren't really super highly ranked, but they just developed them like crazy. To me, that's kind of where I see this thing going for Notre Dame, is more of the Clemson model, where maybe they don't have those top 5 classes, because Clemson's first 2 championship teams had a grand total of 0 top 5 classes in them. 0. I think their first top 5 class came the year after they won their second title. So that's more of the path I see for Notre Dame. So no, I don't. I'm going to sell that. I don't see that. Now, there's some things you can do style of play wise, Vince, that may look more like Michigan, but I think that Clemson team Clemson 2018 had a better defense than Michigan in 2023. And that's not to take anything away from Michigan's defense. It was excellent this year. But that 2018 Clemson defense was ridiculous.
They were built on defense
gosh.
Clemson's defense was good. They had some linebackers that were all over the field. They had some defensive linemen that were just a pill to deal with. I mean, they had good defenses. And I think that gets lost a little bit with the quarterbacks that they had, obviously, and some of the wide receivers and things like that. But their defense, they had a championship caliber defense.
Yeah.
And they kept them in games. So, yeah.
Yeah, we agree on that, Vince, for sure.
Okay, Ballpeen, buy, sell, hold. Other than winning a national championship, Freeman's hiring of Denbrock was the last big step that elevated the team to quote-unquote big dog status.
Buy. Yeah, I buy. Because I think if they win over the next couple of years, that's going to be the last big hire, in my opinion. So, yeah, I think that's the thing that takes the off. Because if they win also, it's why the offense finally gets over the hump.
Yeah.
And that would be the hire that would do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't hire necessarily the quarterback. And so we're talking about hiring of coaches, and you bring in a top quality guy like Mike Denbrock. And of course, look, Mike Denbrock had ties to Notre Dame. It makes that hire, I suppose, a little bit easier, but he was at the top of his profession when he came over. He was the top offensive coordinator out there, and Notre Dame went and took him from an SEC school. I mean, he had the Heisman
and he wasn't a free agent either. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like,
I mean, he was getting ready to sign an extension, but he was still under contract. I mean, they had to pay the buyout and all of those things, and they went and did it. So that's a turning point in a lot of ways, from a hiring standpoint, from a just, you know what, that's the best guy out there, I'm going to get him. Like that takes some brass ones, man, and that's what I want for my head coach. That's for sure.
Agree.
Okay, Ballpeen, here we go. Buy, sell, hold. Now that the great one won the Heisman 2 years in a row, we should have listened to Salty in retrospect.
I love that submission. Absolutely love it. I'm selling it, but I love it. Absolutely love it.
I'll never admit it. Yes. I will eat all of the Virginia salted peanuts that come my way and appreciate them. But I will never in retrospect want to listen more. That's for sure.
That's one of those ones where I hope Salty's right, that he is that.
Yeah.
Like, and I love Jaden Greathouse. I mean, I had him as a top 100 recruit. I think he's very, very good. But I mean, that's, something that's never happened in the history of college football. So,
right.
Receivers very rarely win it anyway, much less 2 in a row.
And I just don't see anybody winning the Heisman Trophy 2 years in a row. It's just, number one, there's an incredible amount of pressure for the guy, if he wins it as an underclassman, to come back and win it a second time. There's an incredible amount of pressure. And then there's also the pressure of the voters to never have another repeat Heisman winner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just don't see them doing that again, even if it's deserved potentially by the guy. But the pressure to win a second one, man, we've seen guys try to win a second one and they just haven't had as good of a season as they did when they won it. And a lot of that comes down to the media scrutiny and all of it, So I don't ever see that happening again.
Yeah, especially with a receiver.
Yeah, especially and the fact that he's a receiver.
Caleb Williams this year. I mean, his numbers this year, people act like his numbers this year were terrible. I mean, his numbers this year were absolutely still top 5 to 6 Heisman Trophy worthy.
Sure.
I mean, again, I'll point it out. This year, Caleb Williams passed for 3,633 yards, 30 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and he ran for 11 touchdowns. Right? So that was in 12 games, by the way. So in 12 games, I'm going to repeat again, 3,633 yards, 30 touchdowns, 5 picks passing. And he also rushed for 11 touchdowns. Did not finish in the top 10 in Heisman Trophy voting. Jordan Travis in 11 games, only 1 fewer game than Caleb Williams, passed for 2,756 yards, 20 touchdowns and 2 picks, and then he rushed for 7 touchdowns in 1 fewer game. And he finished 5th in Heisman Trophy voting. Caleb Williams was a significantly better quarterback than Jordan Travis last year. But his team wasn't great.
Right.
And he was just screwed. And some of it deservedly so. Some of the scrutiny surrounding him was deserved. But how does a guy that put up those kind of numbers, 41 touchdowns, 3,800 yards of offense in 12 games, how does that guy not finish in the top 10 in Heisman Trophy voting? Because of the advanced scrutiny he was under as the reigning Heisman champ. To your point, Vince. So, yeah. Especially in today's media where, and I don't know what it's like before, but I don't know what it was like this, but we live in a world where the media by and large loves to tear people down. Loves to tear people. They will build. Remember what I said last year about Deion? When Deion was getting all the hype and all the love, I said they are doing this with a purpose. They're not hyping him up just because they want to ride the Colorado train. They're hyping him up because they know it's not going to go well early on, and they're going to get to destroy him. That's exactly what they've done. Now he's giving them ammo. He's like, hey, here's a box of 50. You know what I mean? Like he's giving it to them with some things he does.
Box of 50.
But that's the size of the box that the 9mm that I buy comes in, by the way.
Yeah, so, I figured. I picked it up.
But yeah, thank you. But he's giving them the ammo, but they were going to do it anyway.
Right.
That's what they do. They love to build you up so they can tear you down. It's like the same media that built Caitlin Clark up is the same media that's doing everything they can now to find every issue with her. I mean, it's just that's what they do. That's what they do. And it disgusts me, but that's the reality of it, which makes it even harder, in my opinion, to your point, Vince, to win back-to-back titles, especially at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Where they're going to even be overly critical of what you do. 100%.
All right, 3rd and 7, duo, buy, sell, hold. The large conferences will cannibalize themselves, leading to an undefeated number 1 ranked Irish getting the 5 seed, creating a media hurricane and proving to Stephen A. Smith that indeed Notre Dame is more relevant than ever.
I would love that. I would love to prove to Stephen A. Smith that Notre Dame is very relevant. I think Notre Dame is obviously incredibly relevant.
Otherwise, Stephen A. Smith wouldn't be talking about Notre Dame.
Right. Now, to the point of the question, I mean, the undefeated part's the only thing I got to sell, Vince. That's the only holdup I have. Like, I think if Notre Dame's 11-1, I still think they're probably the 5 seed. They at least have a good chance at it, at no worse than the 6. But if the rest of college football cannibalizes itself, I don't think Notre Dame has to be undefeated to be the 5 seed. That's my only point. So,
yeah,
the overall premise I'll buy. Yes. Yeah, the overall premise I'll buy. But again, guys, they're still not going to give Notre Dame credit. Like, if you guys are all out here thinking that Notre Dame needs to go out there and prove these doubters wrong so they finally show Notre Dame respect, they're not going to.
Nope.
They're still not going to.
They got to win a national championship to even start that conversation.
But even then, we'll hear the whole offseason, well, they shouldn't have been there in the first place. The schedule was so soft. Right. They're going to find reasons to tear them down. You know, I mean, the book Under the Tarnished Dome came out. That doesn't get written if Notre Dame's not really good. You know, so that's the reality of it. So they're still going to look for ways to tear Notre Dame down. They're just stop caring what those people think. First of all, Stephen A. Smith thought Dwayne Haskins was a mobile quarterback. He has no clue what he's talking about when it comes to football. None. NFL, college, guy's clueless. So why should Notre Dame fans should ever care what Stephen A. Smith has to say about football? Ever.
It's fair.
He has no idea what he's talking about. And I mean that with all due respect. It's just stick to basketball. That's what you know. You don't see me going out there trying to give I'll give basketball takes as a fan, you know, but you don't hear us talking about let me break down, you know, the X's and O's of Mike Bray's offense and why it led to his demise at Notre Dame. No clue what I'm talking about. None. And that's how, and from what I've heard of Stephen A. Smith, I know more about basketball than he knows about football, from what I've seen as well, especially college football. So, yeah. It's just really pissing me off.
I'm sorry.
It's never done this before, and I don't know why it's doing it today.
It's not funny.
I basically have to minimize it to...
Right.
Okay,
here we go from Hayden32. Buy, sell, hold. A certain person who covers U of M is still profoundly jealous. He no longer covers Notre Dame, so he tries to bash Notre Dame and hype Michigan to cover his true beliefs and maybe tears.
I'm going to sell this because I don't think that's why he acts the way that he acts. I think he acts the way that he acts because that's just who he is. He's a giant D-bag. I mean, that's just, and he's a clickbait artist. He'll if he was still covering Notre Dame, he'd be acting the same way about Michigan and praising Notre Dame. And he just, that's who he is. He plays to his base. He plays to the lowest common denominator because he is the lowest common denominator.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just not good at what he does, in my opinion. And he's just a dishonest person who is miserable at life. You know, and so that's who he is. But I don't think it has anything to do with, because he wanted to leave the Notre Dame beat. He didn't want to cover Notre Dame because Notre Dame fans were hard on him. So I just don't think that has to, you know, get where you're coming from. I love it, but no, he's just that way. He didn't want to cover Notre Dame anymore.
Right.
Because when he went to cover Michigan, it was working for the same boss.
Yes, correct.
The same boss owned the Michigan site and the Notre Dame site, and he asked to go leave the Notre Dame site to go cover Michigan. So it has nothing to do with that.
Is that still the case, by the way?
Yeah, he sold it. He sold it to all three. He retired.
Oh, okay. That was, yeah. All right, Hayden32. Buy, sell, hold of Jadon Blair commits to Notre Dame. We will have 2 freshmen named starters by fall camp next year. Blair and Golden specifically.
That's asking a lot. I can't go there yet. I mean, I want to look. They haven't played their senior years. I could see Dallas Golden. I could see one of them starting, but 2 of them, I don't know that would necessarily be good for Notre Dame. If you had 2 true freshman starters in the secondary, I don't know how much I would love that. I think they're both going to play a ton. And then you're talking about by fall camp. So that basically means
it's going into fall camp.
Yeah, or during fall camp. So I mean, you're still going to have a Don Schuler. You're going to have Luke Talich. You're going to have Bronte Johnson. You're going to have Kennedy Urlacher. You're going to have Ben Minnick. And then maybe a portal guy. That's going to be asking a lot of a true freshman. And a true freshman who I think is a stud. Now, here's the thing. In past years, that probably is true. But this is a much deeper team. But they'll both play a bunch as freshmen. And would I be shocked if your buy, sell, hold was you'll have two freshmen, Dallas Gold and Jadon Blair, that will be starters by the end of the season? Okay. I'd be more willing to buy that because he's viewing Dallas Golden, I would assume, as a nickel, starting in that nickel spot. I'd be more willing to buy that by the end of the year. But by fall camp, before even the first game of the year, that's asking a lot. That's asking a whole lot.
Buy, sell, hold. Riley Leonard is somehow flying under the national radar and is going to come out and have a great season, which turns a new corner for the Irish, becoming one of the elite programs. Okay.
Well, his first part was a statement, and then the second part was the buy, sell, hold.
Okay.
That's how I took it.
I guess what's your definition of an elite program?
Well, I think his conversation is on the field, and I think that's fair. I don't think Notre Dame right now is an elite program on the field. Yeah, they've had a couple playoff bursts, but they lose every time. I mean, TCU has more playoff wins than Notre Dame. Let's be honest. Washington has more playoff wins than Notre Dame. So when I think of, if you're talking about an elite program from, Notre Dame's always has been, always will be an elite program from a brand standpoint. I don't think that's what he's referring to. I look, because to me, is Notre Dame a tier 1 team? No, they're not.
No, they're not. But,
and so to me, that's what an elite program is. It's Notre Dame is not Georgia. They're not Bama. They're not Ohio State. They're not those teams. They're not what Clemson was during their great run. They're just not that yet.
Sure, agree.
And so I'll buy the premise that if Riley Leonard comes out and has a great season, that will help Notre Dame turn the corner. And I don't think it's a thing where they got to win a title, Vince, but they've got to start beating some of those teams. Like, you can't consider yourself elite with Bama, Georgia, and Ohio State when you've never beat them. Like, in this era, you just haven't beat them.
Mm-hmm. So your answer to this question?
I'm going to buy it because I took his first part as a statement, not part of the buy, sell, hold.
Okay.
I took it as he's going to come out and have a great season, and Notre Dame's going to turn the corner and become an elite program, which means going on a deep playoff run. Yeah, I'll buy that.
I'm selling it. I'm selling it because, and here's the reason why, I think it's going to take more than 1 year and one run for Notre Dame to be considered an elite program. So I think they got to do it a couple years in a row. If they go and they make a run this year and then they go and make a run next year, cool, they're elite. But if not, they're TCU. They won a playoff game like that. I mean, to your point,
in this instance, it'd be multiple, but it's a different scenario.
But it's a different, it's a different
finals and all that, right?
So
right.
TCU won a Final Four game,
right,
and so they would have to win 3 games to even be on that level in theory, right? So I mean,
although I would say getting to the semifinals would be more impressive than TCU getting in their circumstance,
and that's
totally not having to play an SEC team in round 1 or 2. And then to get
right.
But your point stands.
Yeah.
Your point stands.
I want to see it. If we're going to talk about elite status, I need to see it more than 1 year. And so that's why I'll sell it. But they can start becoming in the conversation if they make a run, and the manner in which they do it. Like, if they're just squeaking by some teams, I mean, look, Notre Dame fans will take it. They want those wins. Like, I get it. But if you're going to talk, if you want to be talking about them at the same breath as an Alabama or an Ohio State or a Georgia, they better start blowing some of these teams out to a degree if it's just 1 year. Now, if they are winning these games 2 years in a row with 2 different quarterbacks and some turnover and all of that, that's when we start having that conversation, in my opinion.
I like the take, Vince. I'm gonna disagree with it for this standpoint.
That's fine.
And I think all the points you made are very good. Here's the difference between Notre Dame and TCU and Notre Dame and let's say Washington, right? Who's got multiple playoff berths and has a playoff win, right? And they did it, because they made the playoff in 2016.
Sure.
The difference is what has surrounded them is not good. So, like, yes, TCU went 13-2 in 2022, won a playoff game, and had a phenomenal year. But in the year before and the year after, they were 5-7. In 2020 they were 6-4. In 2019 they were 5-7. Like, they just had one magical year. Yes, they won a playoff game, but they had one magical year. It's like the Arizona Cardinals making a run to the Super Bowl. Didn't mean all of a sudden they were a powerhouse NFL team. It just mean they had that one magical year. They made the playoff at 9-7. Playoffs at 9-7. That kind of thing. And so to me, I don't. Notre Dame, again, this is a team that played for the BCS title in 2012 and has made the college football playoff twice and finished 5th in another season. Now, would they be considered on this quite the same level as Ohio State, Georgia, and Bama? No, because those teams have won titles. But would they be considered an elite program if they, let's say, make it to the semifinals? Let's say Riley has a great year, they go undefeated, they win their first round game, they win the quarterfinals, and then they lose by a last-second field goal to Georgia in the semifinals. I'd say, yeah, I think that's put them over the top because they will have had to beat some pretty darn good teams to get there, and they would have a recent track record. I mean, I think in the last 10 years, I think it's the last 10 years, 5 or 7. I forget what it is, but in the last 10 years, Notre Dame, I think, is like 6th in wins nationally, right? Well, that's pretty good. Being 10th in wins in the last, that means You're not elite yet, but you're on the cusp. Going out and having a 14-1 season is, to me, I think puts them on the elite category. I'll say this too, Vince. If they win a semifinal game and get to the championship game and lose in a close game, then it's not even a conversation. In my opinion, they're definitely an elite team. But I think your point stands that either A, you need to be that type of deep team for multiple years, or you need to win a championship. Would you at least concede that if they win the title this year, that puts them on it? Okay.
100%. 100%. Right. Yeah. 100%. Yes. If they win the title, then let's have some fun with this thing. Like, let's take this elite status out for a drive and see what we can do with it. No doubt about it. But I need to see how deep of a run are they making? Right. What does it look like?
And I think there's always context, Vince, right? Yes, like, so if they go to the semi-championship game and lose by a field goal to somebody, Texas, but they beat Ohio State or Georgia on the way in a convincing fashion, then of course that would change things a little bit based on the explanation. So there's always that context.
Right.
But I just love the fact that while I'm pushing back on your point, you got this real indignant look on your face, like you're not changing your mind, and I love that. I love that version of Vince. I do. I love you're not changing my mind. I love that.
People say we agree too much, and I just go with.
Well, I think it's when you'll say something, then I'll disagree, and you're like, yeah, that's right. That's more. So I like the fact you're indignant. But it goes back to your point, Vince. Is there are going to be people that are going to agree with you because they're going to say you have to win a title.
Sure.
Right. And somebody just said Ohio State hasn't won a title in forever. Ohio State won a title in 2014,
which is way more recent than Notre Dame.
Way more. They've won a title in the playoff era.
Right.
Like literally, they were the first college football playoff national title team, and they won a title in 2002. So they've won 2 titles since Notre Dame's last championship. So yeah, they deserve to be in the elite status.
Yeah.
They've won. They played for the title in 2020. They've been in the college football playoff more times than Notre Dame because they were in the playoff in 14. They were the playoff in 16. They were in the playoff in 19 and 20 and 22. They have 5 playoff appearances. Notre Dame has 2. And they've won 3 college football playoff games. Notre Dame has won 0. So I dislike Ohio State as a program. I think Ryan Day is a POS. I don't like their fan base very much outside of Archer and a couple people. But you also can't deny reality.
100%.
You can't deny reality of the fact that they went on a run last year.
And they do it year after year after year.
Yeah, they're down years when they went 11-2 and got roasted by Iowa and people ready to lose their minds. I mean, guys, they're trying to fire a coach who's made how many playoff appearances and has the record he's at. If Ryan Day had the same record, Marcus Freeman has the same record as Ryan Day, no one's talking about firing him.
Correct.
Just because he's lost to USC 3 times in a row. You know what I mean? They're like, hey, you better get over the hump, but they're not losing their minds like Ohio State fans are.
Right.
But that's because of the standard that was laid by Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer. That's what they're being held to. Notre Dame doesn't have that expectation yet. They should, but that's the reality of it. And I'll take look, you can say that you like. Here's the thing, like Stubcast is saying, like I'm fine with them being in the elite conversation. I'm just saying they have not won in 10 years. That's fine. I would gladly take a title within the last 10 years. But as I've said before, you're talking about the last decade. They do have a title, but again. They won it in 14. They were in the playoff in 16, in the playoff in 17, in 19, in the playoff in 20, in the playoff in 22, and they played for the championship twice and won one. And they're good every year. A down year for Ohio State's 11-2. I think last year was one of the worst years they've had in a long time. They went 11-3 or 11? No, they were 11-2. Yeah, because they lost to Michigan. And then lost to Missouri. So 11. That's a down year for Ohio State. When you're down years 11-2, you're an elite program, and you've won a title in the last decade, and you've played for it multiple times. You're an elite team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you could say, well, yeah, Georgia's won more titles, but Georgia's had more down years than Ohio State has had in the last decade as well. So, I mean, I think the only team that's won more games in the last decade than Ohio State, I think, is Bama. I think there's only one. So, and I think people get too hyper focused on most recent championship. Because, Michigan beat Ohio State. Michigan won a title last year, and they beat Ohio State 3 times in a row. If you look at the last decade, Ohio State is still a significantly better program than Michigan has been over the course of the last decade. Like, Michigan's got a nice little run going right now. But, like, in the last 10 years, who's better, Florida State or Clemson? Florida State is not even close to Clemson the last 10 years. Well, yeah, they beat them last year. But it's like, and this isn't about Stubbscast. I get the point he's making. But it's like this. You see online, these college football Twitter pages. Best quarterback of all time. And like the oldest quarterback on there is like Danny Warfel. You know what I mean? It's like, really? Did college football not start till like 1995? Or best running back ever. And like the oldest running back on there is like Ricky Williams. I'm like, you guys do know football started like way before those dudes, right? And, it's like, to me, there's like a 10-year window of if you're Ohio State's been just really flipping good for 10 years. That's an elite program. They just are. Again, what's their worst record in that stretch, Vince? It's 11-2.
Right.
That's their – I'm sorry. 8-1, right?
Oh,
because of the COVID year.
Yeah.
But you get the point that I'm making.
Right.
You get the point that I'm making. So, yeah, they're an elite team. They're an elite team. Somebody just made a point that I think is really good, Vince. Georgia was Notre Dame before winning in 2021 and 2022. It's a great point.
That's fair. I think that's fair. That's a fair statement, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And if Notre Dame can go back to back, then there will be no doubting who Notre Dame is. Recruiting will take a jump, and everything that happened to Georgia could very well happen to Notre Dame. No doubt about it. So that's a really good point because they hadn't won. What was their last championship before?
With Herschel Walker back in the 80 or 81?
Yeah, it was early 80s.
Well, Clemson, when Clemson won in 2016, their last title was in I think 1980 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Stubbcast said, Drisk, I think you and I agree on what you're saying. I was pointing out that they are still elite and haven't won a title in 10 years. Yeah, I get it. Okay, so I took what he was saying was wrong. He's saying they haven't won a title in a while. Yeah. And yet they're still elite. So that I get it. You're good, man. That makes sense. So I'm with you on that one. Georgia's was in 1980, and I think Clemson's was 1981. And prior to 2002, Ohio State hadn't won a title since like 1970 something. So they'd gone up like about the same time as Notre Dame has as well. So you are correct. And Michigan hadn't won a full title since the 40s. Because Bo Schembechler never won a title.
Right. All right. O&D 15, buy, sell, hold. Both Jadarian Price and Love would start at every team in Notre Dame's schedule this year. So, like individually, like if they were each individually on every team kind of deal? Okay.
Let me just think through this. So, I think they would both start at Texas A&M, I believe. I think that was, by the way, a mistake for them not to offer Jadarian Price. But let me just look and see who Texas A&M's running back. They have a returning running back who's a good player, but I'm not sure if I think he's better than Jadarian. I just put it off the top of my head. I can't, because I think I've had this conversation before, Vince, where I've been like, I think they would start on X number of teams. But let me just look at A&M real quick and see who their starting tailback is going to be this season. It is going to project it to be Amari Daniels. So let me go. Yeah. But so A&M, just give me a second here. So Amari Daniels last year ran for 532 yards, 5.1 yards per carry, 6 touchdowns. That's right in line with what the Notre Dame kids did. Yeah, actually they were both better than him yards per carry, same catches. So, and he's a good talent. I think they're both a better talent. So I'll go A&M. After that, you go down to, look, there's some guys that are experienced. Like USC has a running back, Woody Marks, who's not, I think, more talented than those guys, but I think that they're both, but he's more experienced, right? Somebody just said Reuben Owens is at A&M. I don't know if Reuben Owens at A&M or not, but they're not better than Jeremiah Love, or he's not better than Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price, in my opinion. But trying to think through the running backs on the roster. Miami of Ohio, no. Purdue, no. Northern Illinois, no. Stanford, no. Louisville, no. Georgia Tech, no. Virginia, no. Army, no. Navy, no. Florida State, no. They have good backs, but not better than those kids. They have pretty good backs, but not better than those kids. And USC, no. So, it's a shot. It's a shot. I think that they're better than the kids that Florida State has. I do think they're better than them. Those guys are more experienced, but they're not better than the Notre Dame. They're more talented. I think those kids would start. I think Jeremiah Love Jadarian Price. I'll buy that. I'll buy that. I have to go back and like give me the ability to kind of look back and just go through everybody's depth charts again. But off the top of my head, I'll buy that.
I believe this is Notre Dame has a top 2 secondary.
Yeah,
okay, so buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame has a top 2 secondary coming into this season.
Buy. I think Notre Dame and Ohio State have the 2 best secondaries in college football right now. Yep. Agree. They've got 2 All-Americans, a guy that transferred in from a Big Ten school, had 80-plus tackles last season. Christian Gray's an elite young talent. You've got Jordan Clark, who's a veteran player. You've got depth. 100% agree with that.
So how good is Florida State's secondary?
It's good, but they lost half their starting secondary from last year and one of their key backups. Like Ventrell Cypress is really good player. He's probably their best returning player there, but he's not as good as Benjamin Morrison, and their best safety, who's also coming back, is not as good as Xavier Watts.
Okay.
So like Florida State lost a lot. They lost a lot of players, but their secondary is not as good. As a matter of fact, I don't even know that they don't even have the best. They might even have the best returning secondary that Notre Dame faces this year. I think Louisville's got a pretty good secondary coming back. USC now with the incoming transfers has a pretty good secondary. I like Florida State's secondary a lot. I don't. It's not on the same level as Notre Dame's right now. That would be the closest one. But like Michigan has a pretty good secondary. I don't think they're as good as Notre Dame. I'll take Benjamin Morrison's every bit as good as Will Johnson, but losing Rod Moore hurts their secondary, in my opinion. They don't have anybody like Xavier Watts at safety. And then they lost their starting nickel, and they lost their other starting corner as well. And then Keon Sabb transferred to Alabama. Anyone that ranks Michigan's secondary ahead of Notre Dame's is not paying attention to either secondary in what they have. Iowa's is really good. It's really good. I want to see Iowa go against, however, real passing teams. The Big Ten West had nobody that was really good at throwing football, in my opinion. So I'm gonna buy that one hard, and I don't think it's really close. It's not even conversation going into the season, and it's not a conversation for me. You can have one, Vince. Doesn't mean you can't say it. That's just an expression I use to say, like, for me, it's a no-brainer.
No. I totally. Somebody said to me that Florida State has the best secondary on Notre Dame's schedule, including Notre Dame. I was like, I don't think that's accurate.
Who said that?
I'll tell you later.
Okay. Like that person, I don't think is very aware of who Florida State has, who they lost, and who they have coming back.
I agree completely. I was taken aback when that statement was made, but I don't have the depth of knowledge to have that argument. You know what I mean? And so I didn't want to like jump down the rabbit hole, but yeah, I figured that was probably the case.
Let's just have the conversation real quick, Vince, and let's look at it. Let's look at Florida State's returning secondary this year. So first of all, they lost one of their starting corners. One of their nickel guy, Greedy Vance, transferred to USC. They have Shaheem Brown coming back, solid player, not as good as Xavier Watts. Ventrell Cypress is their best starting corner coming back. He's not as good as Benjamin Morrison. And then they have a new starter at the other cornerback spot. So, and then Conrad Hussey's their new starter at safety. None of those guys are as good as neither of their 2 returning starters are as good as Notre Dame's 2 returning starters. And then their backups are good players, like the Thomas kid they have coming back at corner. They have a couple of the young corners that are talented guys. They're going to battle for that spot. I think they got like a really highly ranked safety last year that's going to come in and be good for them. But no, that's not close. It's not close to being what Notre Dame's secondary is, in my opinion. Not close.
Works for me.
Georgia will also have a very good secondary, but it's not as good as Notre Dame's. It's not. Malachi Starks is very, very good. And I would argue it's a top 5 secondary, but Notre Dame's to me is clearly better. Because again, Notre Dame is not putting a solid player in to replace Cam Hart. They're putting a legit top 100, top 50 guy that LSU wanted, that Ohio State wanted badly. They beat him for him. You know what I mean? And you've got a guy coming in and Rod Hurd who thrived in the Big Ten level at that, already. And now he comes in where he had to be their best DB last year. He's going to be at best 3rd at Notre Dame this year, if he even starts. So it's not cllose for me.
All right. D-Troll Hunter has a buy, sell, hold. Texas fans chanting, "We want Georgia" at midnight as they entered the SEC will be replayed 100 times by Kirby in the locker room during game week.
Texas fans, if I'm a Texas player, I'm saying to myself, you freaking morons, what are you doing?
Why?
Just no. Yeah, and then they're going to be going to Texas. So those same knuckleheads are going to be yelling that before the game.
Oh yeah,
that could end up coming back to haunt them a little bit. Like that's going to be a great game, Vince. Great game. You're at home. You don't want to do something to give Georgia that little extra something for that game. You don't want that. You don't want that at all.
No. You don't want that in any way, shape, or form. But here's what I'll say to this to the question specifically is that let's see here. So that's the middle of the season. Okay, it's October 19th. What I'll say to that is I don't know. Look, you got to motivate kids in all different ways and all of those different things. I don't think he's going to need to do this in the locker room.
Oh, but Kirby loves to do that kind of stuff.
Is that who he is? Because I feel like just them showing up and hearing it during pregame is going to be more than enough. Like, I don't know that he needs to do that all week.
I don't know that he'll do it all week, but I think it'll be known.
Okay.
It'll like you're not doing it at the beginning and end of every practice, and it's not, you know what I mean? But it'll be known. You want us? Okay, we're gonna show you a little something.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is Texas is good. It's the week after they have to play Oklahoma in the Red River Shootout, which is going to be a tough game. Where Georgia's coming off of a home game against Mississippi State. Like, yeah, you're going to be, and there's a chance Georgia has a loss by then. They got to play Clemson on neutral field and at Bama. So they may be like, our backs are against the wall. Like, I just don't know why people do this.
Right.
Like, I just don't look, guys, it's like, we're going to do a show at some point in the summer, top 10 college football coaches. And just, Vince, I'm a big fan of Steve Sarkisian, like love Sark. But now, like, he's jumped into the top 5 college. I'm like, based on what? The guy's been a head coach for 9 years. He has one season of 10 or more wins. One. My buddy's like, hey, inherited an 0-12 Washington team. Yeah, true. And he never got it more than an 8-win team in 5 years. It's like, guys, he had a great year. He has a lot to prove. He's an elite offensive mind. But can we, like, Sonny Dykes has had TCU and Texas the last 3 years with both of those coaches at those programs have the same exact record. Same exact record. The difference is Sonny Dykes won a playoff game. Steve Sarkisian did not.
Yeah.
Right? So, but it's because it's Texas. And so the overhype begins. And I just think they have a lot more to prove. And I think I think Texas is a good football team. But I think people are making a little bit too much out of the win over Bama last year. Bama was not a very good team last year. I mean, for Bama, they weren't. And they had like really one good game all year, and that was beating Georgia. That's really it. So I just careful what you wish for, Vince.
100%. I think that's the best summary I could ever think of for that and for this entire question is be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
100%. Here we go. D-Troll Hunter, buy, sell, hold. Quinn Ewers said, quote, we are every team's biggest game, unquote. Buy, sell, hold, people thinking that is controversial thing to say.
I mean, I'm going to buy that people think it's controversial because we have a very emotionally fragile country now where just every little thing gets people in their feelings and now there's emotional violence and words are violent. We are a very soft people. So yes, you say something like that, people are going to be offended by it because people get offended easily. I'm selling that it should be controversial. He didn't say it disrespectfully. He didn't say, oh, we're the best team in the SEC wherever. I mean, nope. Texas is, if you're at Texas, that's kind of how you feel. That's how it's been for you in the Big 12. You are the biggest game for everyone on your schedule.
Yep.
How does he know that it's not going to be that way in the SEC? That's all he's known there. So I have no problem with it. And he said it in a respectful way. The context was totally fine. There's nothing wrong with what he said, but we are a very soft, emotionally soft people, and we get offended by everything now. And so, yes, people are going to be offended by that.
If Riley Leonard said this quote, how would people feel?
They'd still have the same in their feelings, butthurt type of reaction to it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't think it has anything to do with Quinn Ewers.
Exactly.
Quinn Ewers has said a lot of things in his past that it's like, really? But this one, I have no problem with.
He's a pretty good kid. Last 2 years, he's grown up a lot.
That's what I'm saying. Completely. Yeah. That's what that is 100% what I'm saying. Like, him leaving early from high school and all this other stuff was a bit much. But then he is completely, he cut off the hair and kind of
I mean, look,
flying straight.
I would hope that I would hope that you and I both are not judged for very long for what we did as 17 and 18-year-olds.
Fair.
That's all I'm saying.
That is a fair statement.
Look, we can be critical of kids. Look, I'm not saying don't be critical of an 18-year-old just because an 18-year-old can go fight in a war.
Sure.
But at the same time, like when they give you evidence that that's not who they are anymore, be willing to give them that grace.
Right.
And I still think there's a lot of people that look at Quinn Ewers as sort of arrogant, overhyped kid that chose not to play his senior year so he would get paid at Ohio State. And that bothered me a lot. But when I watch how he conducts himself the last 2 years, that's not the same kid. He's grown up. He's had to grow up. And props to him for doing so.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but some people are just not going to give forgiveness for that, because the other thing about our society is that not only are we emotionally soft and fragile, we don't forgive. We have an utter lack of grace in our society. And so I've actually become a bit of a Quinn Ewers fan, because that's why I like, one of the reasons I like Sark. Guy had every chance, every opportunity for his career to just go into the toilet after his drinking problem at USC. He's going through some stuff personally, and he had that problem for a while. And you know what? From everything you hear, he became a better man, not just a better coach, Vince, but he became a better man out of that. And you know what? That's great. I love that. That's what it's all about. Because I truly thank God that he's willing to still sacrifice himself on that cross so that me and my imperfect self and all the bad flaws that I have as a person can still find salvation through that, right? And so that doesn't mean we can't judge people, but it should mean that when people show us, like, here's the thing, you got to forgive, right? Okay, yes, you got to forgive, but forgiveness doesn't mean I forgot what you did. I can forgive you for what you did, but you're still fired. You know what I mean? As a human, I forgive you, but the trust isn't there. I get all that. But at the same time, when someone shows you I'm not that person anymore by my actions, then that person deserves that grace to be evaluated on what they're doing now and now what Quinn Ewers has done now for multiple seasons, in my opinion. And so I just think people just like to be, I think, you know what it is, Vince? I think people just like to be offended. We're a victim culture. Like, everybody's a victim for something, and that's just what I think people are. They get so offended by stuff. There's nothing wrong with what he said. And he plays at Texas. Of course he's going to feel that way.
Sure.
So I just think we're just soft, dude. I'm sorry. I hate to say it, but we are. Like, not everybody, but just as a society, it just, the things people get offended by now, like I've seen people at a restaurant just lose their ever-loving minds because their steak wasn't done properly.
Right.
It's like, dude, okay, get it sent back, get it fixed, but holy crap, you need to be committed to a psych ward because of this emotional reaction you're having to a steak not being done properly. So yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think that we don't hold anybody accountable anymore either. But that's just me.
Yeah.
So
I said some. I ain't gonna get into that. People would treat each other differently if butt whoopings were still a thing.
You darn right.
I'm not even talking about parents. I'm talking about, like, if you come and talk to me a certain way, you're gonna get dealt with, and as long as it doesn't end up with you in the ICU, courts are gonna say, well, you know what, you shouldn't have said that to him.
Right.
And because I just feel like people act a certain way because they're just not afraid of being punched in the face anymore. Or if they are get punched in the face, I'll get punched in the face, but I'm going to sue you. It's like, if that wasn't the case, people would act differently. Let's be honest about that. They would. Could you imagine, like, why do kids talk to their parents the way that I see them talk to their parents in stores all the time? Because they know they're not about to get dragged out to their car and get their behind worn out.
Right. It all goes back to parenting. I'm sorry. Yeah. It does. It all goes back to parenting. So I'll just leave it at that. I see it every single day of my life. Yeah. So, all right. And I am not a perfect parent, by the way. Brian has been witness to that plenty of times.
No, you're a great dad, though, but nobody's perfect.
Nobody's not even close. All right. Anyway, D-Troll Hunter, buy, sell, hold. UTSA versus Texas State is a game people should want to watch week 2.
Yeah. Buy that for sure. I mean, nobody knows who those teams are, but
give me a reason why I should watch that game.
Well, you've got two of the better offensive minds at that level. G.J. Kinney was the starting quarterback at Tulsa when they beat Notre Dame in 2010.
Okay.
And Texas State won 8 games last year. Very good offense, averaged about 37 points a game. He comes from that air raid family, of football. Very good football team. Exciting offense, in my opinion. Some talented players coming back. And then UTSA has been a really good program the last couple of years. I think won 11 games a couple of years ago. It's 2 good football coaches and 2 good football minds who are very soon going to be coaching at much bigger schools.
Yeah.
That if you like good football events and you don't really care about, okay, maybe it's not the most elite talent on the planet, but it's good football, that's the kind of game you want to watch.
So what you're saying is I should have paid more attention when Texas State sent my kid something.
Yeah. Well, the reality is
too far away.
No, it's too far, but most likely that won't be the head coach for very long.
Yeah, and that's fair too. Yeah. That's the biggest problem, and I know this is a tangent. That's the biggest problem with this recruiting thing is that his number 1 school, I'm guessing the coach might get fired mid-season. So, what does that mean? You know what I mean? that is really nerve-wracking for this whole process. But anyway, all right, buy, sell, hold. That also both G.J. Kinney, Texas State head coach, and Jeff Traylor, UTSA head coach, will be Power 4 head coaches next season.
I don't know that GJ will be there next season. So I'm going to sell that. I think he might need 1 more year unless they just have a crazy type of breakout season. He's been a head coach for 2 years. He was an incarnate word 2 years ago, and they were pretty good. And he was at Texas State last year, went 8-5.
That's a meteoric rise right there.
Yeah. So Power 4, I don't know about that. If he were to leave Texas State after this year, I could see something along the lines of, maybe next year he gets hired at a Memphis if let's say their coach moves on or something like that. But I don't know that it'll be Power 4 just yet. However, there are some Big 12 jobs that could come open in the next year or two that he would have a shot at, in my opinion.
Fair.
So, I think that could be the case because he was a relatively somewhat highly ranked recruit coming out. I think he started his career at Texas and then transferred to Tulsa, I believe. So, yeah, I mean, it's possible, but I think GJ is going to need to show it to me for 1 more year before I kind of jump on that type of bandwagon. And that's kind of the thing with Jeff Traylor that I think it's hurt Jeff Traylor a little bit too. Vince is, he's been at UTSA now for 3 seasons. It was his first job as a head coach. He's gone 7-5, 12-2, 11-3, 9-4. That's pretty good. And he still hasn't gotten a bit bigger job. So, I just think he's going to have to GJ's going to have to prove it a little bit longer. But if Jeff Traylor can win 10 games this year after losing Frank Harris and all the receivers they lost, then I think he gets a Power 5 job. I do.
Okay. Buy, sell, hold with the announcement of a succession plan for Kyle Whittingham's successor to ultimately be his defensive coordinator, Coach Scally. In general, are we a buy, sell, hold on succession plans instead of doing a national search?
I'm a buy. I'm a buy in theory. It's like with anything, Vince. There are certain circumstances where I'm like, that's not appropriate. Like when Bill Snyder was trying to get his son to be his replacement. Like, no, that's not the kind of succession. Right. Like your son's not that caliber coach. But, a situation where it's like, hey, Kyle Whittingham, he's been there a long time. Morgan Scally played for him, coached for him. You want to kind of create a situation where he's your heir apparent because you want to keep what you're doing. Like I worked all this time to build Utah into the situation we're in. And I wanted to keep it rolling. And that's how I got the job. Because Kyle Whittingham replaced Urban Meyer. He was Urban Meyer's, I think, D coordinator.
That's true.
And so that succession worked. Your head coach left. You stepped right in and you kept this thing building and kept this thing growing. I'm a fan of that in theory. It just practically, it can be bad. And I'm also like, you better have been pretty good for a long period of time before you start talking about like if Marcus Freeman leaves for the Bears next year, he's like, I want my guy to be, no, dude, you've been here 3 years. You're not, you know what I mean? Like, but like certain coaches, if they want to, when Brian Kelly left, there was one of his assistants replaced him, but he didn't have any say on that. He had no say on that. So what I'm looking at is not simply so much that like, okay, you were hired from the staff, but you get to choose my replacement is going to be this person. Doesn't always work out because remember when Mac Jones had Will Muschamp as his replacement at Texas? and ended up not panning out that way, and he left and all that. So it just depends on. It's got to be the right coach, in my opinion.
Correct.
But just in theory, with no context, I'm a fan of the successor if it's someone that has truly understands what your culture is all about. I think it can be risky like anything else. Any hire is risky. There's no guarantee that things keep rolling, and a lot of times it doesn't work out. Bill Butch Davis leaves Miami, right? They want Larry Coker. He comes in, and they were pretty good for a couple of years, won a title, played for a title next year, and then they fell off a cliff quick because he wasn't a very good head coach. So yeah, it can go wrong, but in theory, I'm a fan of it. I think you get to a certain point, Vince, you've earned the right to like that's what Bob Stoops did with Lincoln Riley. He earned that right to say, this is who I want to take the mantle from me.
Well, and as an athletic director, I mean, not that you don't want to go through a national search, because there is something to that, right? As far as, going through and checking off certain things and talking to certain people and, getting into the mind of certain people, maybe that you don't know a whole lot about. Like there's something to be said for that whole process, but there's also something to be said for a guy that, how they operate, who they are, their morals, as much as you can, obviously, in a professional relationship. But at the same time, it's about who the head coach is at the moment and who he wants, or who is the successor going to be, and is it somebody that the athletic director wants, and how much clout does the athletic director have at that moment? I mean, there's so many different levels to this. But as an athletic director, if you've got somebody who's been there for a long time, that's respected and has earned it, and he says, this is the guy I want, if it's the guy that I want too, then okay, let's do this. Let's get on board with it. If the coach is like, I want this guy, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's a great decision, then you don't go that direction. Everybody has to be on board, in my opinion. And it can't be a situation where this person is sitting in the succession chair for 5, 6, 7 years. You know what I mean? Because so much can change in that amount of time.
What is the time frame you're comfortable with, Vince?
Honestly,
mine would be like 2 to 3 at the most.
Yeah, absolutely. Because so much can change in that amount of time. There could be somebody that comes up that I really want to take a look at, and now I'm pigeonholed into a corner and I can't do that anymore. Or maybe the circumstances have just changed with the people that we're talking about. Maybe the head coach wants to stick around longer. Maybe the successor, maybe that relationship has changed. Just so much can happen after about a 2-year period. And then that's not even taking into account just the landscape of college football and conference realignment and, playoffs and money and just all of those different things. So in this day and age, I wouldn't do it for more than 2 to 3 years.
Fair.
And at that point, there's an out. You know what I mean? At that point, there's an out when we can all explore different things.
Yep, it's fair.
Okay, here we go. Buy, sell, hold. The Pac-12 team's agreement with the Mountain West only lasts this season before both Oregon State and Washington State are scooped up by the ACC to give more scheduling options for their West Coast members.
I'm buying that, but I think it's a lot more complex than that, because I do believe this goes back to the earlier question about Florida State choosing to opt out of the ACC.
Yeah.
So one of two things is happening with Florida State and Clemson. One is they are genuinely wanting to leave the ACC and just one out. Two is they're trying to get out of the ACC, and then ESPN cancels the ACC deal, which they can do within the next year. And then the ACC then negotiates with Florida State and Clemson. Hey, okay, now that deal's over. You guys come back in, and we're going to negotiate a better deal. Right. Because there's not that landing spot for you out there. That's possible as well. But if the more likely option is Clemson and Florida State leave and they stay gone, now all of a sudden Oregon State and Washington State become very attractive options to the ACC, not just for that reason, but also because now they're below the threshold that they would need for their contract to kind of stay. Right. There's some penalties for Florida State or for the ACC if they fall below a certain number of teams. And I think it's like 14 or something like that. And I think that's going to factor in to me if that happens. So that's going to be an interesting deal. So yeah, that's what I think. So that's what I think, Vince. What are your thoughts on that? So it's not just about the scheduling options, but it's also going to be about they're going to need those two teams to stay the certain parameters.
I could definitely see that being the case, that they bring them in. I mean, it's still hard for me to wrap my mind around the fact that the ACC has teams on the West Coast. I mean, that's just, but if the scenario that you talked about earlier on in the show of, first it's Florida State, then it's Clemson, then it's North Carolina, then it's North Carolina State, and then it's all these, they're going to have to replace those teams if they want to still be a viable conference, right? And so the easy answer is the two teams that really don't have a conference. And that would be these two. And so that would be an easy add back to the
technically conference. They have a conference.
Well,
what'll be interesting is if they want that, because the other alternative is they have a lot of money to work with now because of the way that they negotiated the deal to get those other schools out. So they were able to keep a lot of the money for the Pac-12.
Sure.
Which could potentially allow them to go out there and convince some teams. Well, not create another conference, but to raid the Mountain West and some others to bring schools into the Pac-12 to try to rebuild the Pac-12. That's another option that they may choose to do. Because if you're them, there's two Pac-12 teams that we can former Pac-12 teams we can play, but those games that only goes so far.
Yeah,
you're still going to have to travel the East Coast all the time. The other thing is, what if we can convince Fresno and San Jose and San Diego State and some of those teams to leave the Mountain West and come to the Pac-12. That could be another potential option too, Vince.
So you may not even know the answer to this question, but let's say that Oregon State and Washington State decide to go to the ACC. What happens to that war chest of money that they now have at the Pac-12 what happens to all that money?
That's a great question. I have no idea.
Like, that's a lot of money that just now is unclaimed, I guess. That would be fascinating to me to find out.
I wish I knew the answer to that. I honestly don't know. I generally don't know the answer to that question.
Oh, fair enough. I was just curious.
But it would be fascinating. It really would be fascinating.
I can just see a lot of shysters trying to get their hands on that money. You know what I mean? Just, I don't know. Guess that's my negative mindset when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
I get that.
All right. Buy, sell, hold. Lane Kiffin's recruiting woes stem from a lack of effort more than a lack of resources.
Well, part of it. It's also just because you have resources, those resources work a lot better on the portal than they do with high school kids.
Sure.
It's a lot easier to convince some kid that's a big-time player to come spend a year in Oxford, Mississippi than it is to come spend 3 or 4.
Is Oxford that bad of a place?
No, it's just,
I don't know anything about it.
It's Mississippi, though. It's kind of like they don't have the tradition of other programs. They don't have the history of other programs. It's in Mississippi. It's not a bad town from what I'm told, but it's not like Tuscaloosa. It's not like Miami. It's not like Gainesville. It's not like, it's just not that. And so, and Lane Kiffin's not a great recruiter, in my opinion.
Sure.
For some similar reasons to Brian Kelly. I just don't know that it's something he likes to do.
It's not a priority for him.
No, I don't think so.
Personally.
Yeah, I really don't think so. So I think that's part of it as well, Vince, for me. Is I think you have to look and say, hey, I think the big reason is I don't think he really likes to grind the way that you need to grind, in my opinion, to be a top coach. I just don't think he does.
All right, buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame should create an athletic program, Trust, that will offer long-term returns as a way to counter other schools' upfront NIL payments.
Yeah, I kind of like this. I wish they would do more of this. I think that would be such a better way to care for young people if you could find a way where speaking of what you were referring to either earlier, Vince, of people taking advantage of other people, I would be worried about that. Some investor person gets all this money from the Notre Dame players and then he does something bad. I mean, I would want it to be something that was not so much like an investment, but more so, hey, we're going to put this money away, something that's going to get you some returns over the next few years. And then, when you leave, when you graduate, you're going to get this.
Maybe controlled by the university, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, something along those lines.
I wouldn't want to control by a third party, no matter who it is.
Yeah.
Maybe like a former Notre Dame player.
It would be a third party in that the school, but the school has shown Notre Dame has done part of the reason Notre Dame's endowment has gone up is because they invested part of it at great returns.
Okay.
So that helped as well. But
gotcha.
Yeah, I've always, I mean, this is something similar to what I've advocated for in the past before NIL was a big thing. I've said, look, anything that's related to merchandise specific to the football team. So like jerseys, for example, I've always said jerseys should have been something that the school said, we're going to take 25% of all jersey sales, set them aside. And we're going to, every time when a players graduate, we're going to give them, a cut of it.
Yeah.
And that's, that's going to be something, or we use this to say, hey, we're going to take care of your medical expenses, for the next 5 years that you have, unless you go to the NFL, then it's the NFL's job. But if you're not an NFL player, if you don't make a full-time NFL roster, look, a lot of these injuries you accrued playing for us.
Yeah.
And so we're going to, take care of whatever comes next. And then we're, and if you don't have any of that, then we'll just give you, X amount, or you can just give it to them. And then if you have injuries, you take care of it yourself if you want to. But like, I've always been a supporter of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be on top of what you're giving already as part of collectives and things like that is what I would, is kind of how I would read that situation. So cool. Thoughts? You good?
Yeah, no, I'm good with that. That was a really good answer. All right. Last one from D-Troll Hunter. Buy, sell, hold. If Virginia Tech beats Miami week 5, we can rule them out of competing for the ACC title.
I'll buy that. Yeah, you're talking about Miami. I assume he's talking about Miami, right? Is that how you read that?
Yeah, because Miami's out now. So, Miami got beat, so they're out of the comp. Yeah, right.
I buy that. Miami's going to have talent. There's no doubt. They're going to be a very talented team, but I just don't have a lot of faith in Mario Cristobal. And they would still have at Louisville on their docket. They would have home against Florida State on their docket, at Georgia Tech on their docket. So if they lose to Virginia Tech at home, and I think Virginia Tech is going to be a good football team, at Cal, at Louisville, home against Florida State, at Georgia Tech, at Syracuse are not gimmies. They're just not. So I would rule them out. I think it'd be very tough for them to win it out
because they'd have to run. You're saying they would have to run the table at
pretty
that
much,
point.
Yeah. They would have to beat Louisville at Louisville, Florida State at home, and then hope that another team. And because like my thing is, if they lose to Virginia Tech at home, it means they're just not a great team yet. They're talented, but they're not a great team, and that's kind of how I predict. That's how I project that their season is going to go. To be completely honest with you, now, and I'm someone who thinks Virginia Tech's going to have a good football team this year. But they shouldn't go to Miami and beat Miami if Miami's a legitimate ACC contender.
Right.
That's kind of where I'm coming from.
All right, we got a buy, sell, hold from Lucky 905. Lane Kiffin will replace Billy Napier at Florida after the 24 season. Jeff Lebby takes over the reins at Ole Miss, and Jeff Traylor succeeds Sam Pittman at Arkansas.
I'm selling the heck out of that.
Wow, selling the heck out of it.
A couple of those I could understand. Like Lane Kiffin going to Florida, I could see that. Jeff Traylor going to Arkansas, I could see that. There's no, in my opinion, I don't see any scenario in which Jeff Lebby goes to Mississippi State for one season and then leaves to go to Ole Miss. I just don't see that happening. Like I don't see that.
They have a heck of a season at
Mississippi Jeff, but he'd have 1 year as a head coach. I don't think they're going to have a heck of a season. And I just think if you're Ole Miss, you got money floating around, you're going to want to do better than raiding Mississippi State for their head coach. I just, now again, Jeff Lebby has ties at Ole Miss. That's probably where it comes from. He coached at Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin. I get all that, but I don't think that would be the move in my opinion. But I could be wrong. But I don't see that inside straight happening. I just don't see all three of those happening.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's three. Like, I do believe Lane Kiffin will leave to go to Florida. I could definitely see that happening. The other two are a little harder to see for me.
Yeah.
So that's
I like Jeff Traylor. I think I could see that one for sure.
Okay. Aiden Benami with a buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame stays in the top 10 in all 4 services for the 25 recruiting class. Back to recruiting.
Well, I'm going to sell that because I think 247 Sports is, if you're talking about like personal, like their own individual rankings, not the composite, right? So like right now, I view Notre Dame as very likely stays in the top 10 for composite rankings, but on 247 Sports rankings of Notre Dame themselves are so incredibly bad that I think it's going to knock them out of the top 10 just because they're terrible. But everyone else will have them in. But composite rank, if you took 24/7's composite, then I'd say sure, I think they stay in the top 10. But yes, top 10, sure. But if you take composite, but overall, I still think 247 will drop them out. So that's why I'd sell that one.
Another one from Iden, buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame will pay for play within 2 years.
Sell.
Huge sell. It'll just never be a blank check situation. I mean, it's just never going to be that.
It's a terrible investment. Like, it's such a terrible investment.
Right. Absolutely agree. I just don't see Notre Dame ever going in that direction. They will have packages. They will show you what you can earn. They will do all of that. They'll hook you up with, sponsorships and all of those things that will all happen.
They're not just going to hand you $1 million to sign.
Correct.
They're just not going to do that.
That's just not going to be
I'll
how
be
Notre
shocked
Dame
if
uses
that
it.
happens.
Me too. Now, does he mean the whole like players are going to be employees kind of a thing?
That's not Notre Dame's call, but that's not what he means.
Right.
By when people say pay for play, they just mean here's $1 million to sign with us.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page.
Because like all their players are getting paid. I mean, everyone's getting paid.
Even the walk-ons.
Even walk-ons, correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. In 3 years, Notre Dame's defensive back room will have 2 6'4" kids starting, Blair and O'Brien.
In 3 years.
So by 25, 26,
I'm going to sell that because 24, 25, it'd have to be the 26 season, which would be Joey O'Brien would be a true freshman because he's a 2026 kid.
Okay.
So, no, I don't think Joey O'Brien as a true freshman starts over Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs and Dallas Goldman and Mark Zachary and Cree Thomas. Will he play? Sure. And now in 4 or 5 years, maybe. I mean, Jadon Blair would be a true sophomore and Joey O'Brien would be a true freshman. They're both outstanding prospects. I love Joey O'Brien. Everybody already knows I love Jadon Blair, but I love Joey O'Brien in the 2026 class. But no, three seasons is 24, 25, and 26. Even if he means 27, like 23 seasons after 24, that's still going to be a tough one with the way that they've recruited. Will they both be playing? Will they have 2 DBs at 6'4" that are playing a bunch? Bye. Both of them selling right now when we haven't even seen Joey O'Brien play his junior year of high school? No, I can't go there. Can't go there. That's a fair question. Joey O'Brien's very good.
No, I get the questions. I just always find it amusing the projections that people put on high school kids that have only played half of their high school career. I mean, they still have 2 years left. I coached high school for a really long time, and you were involved in the high school game from a recruiting standpoint, from the college game. So much can change from when a kid is exiting his sophomore year to exiting his senior year. So much can change, both physically, mentally, academically. I mean, you name it, so many things can change. So it's just, I get that's where we are as a recruiting community, and that's the way that this whole thing is trending, and it just gets younger and younger and younger and younger. And I get it. I totally understand it. And we have to be on board because that's the way it is. I get that. It's just there's so much that can change, man.
Well, and they're recruiting so well.
Yeah, right.
That's the thing, is they're recruiting so well.
Right.
And we're back to that.
I don't get it. Like, it does it sometimes, and then it doesn't do it other times.
It's so lame. I need to restart my computer, I think.
Madges 16, buy, sell, hold. Jerry Faust. Ooh, a Jerry Faust reference here. Jerry Faust's last game at Notre Dame was a low point in my Notre Dame fan days. The Catholics versus convicts was a sweet moment. I try not to hate anyone, but I intensely dislike Jimmy Johnson in Miami. It not be nice if Notre Dame won a playoff game against Brian Kelly and LSU for more than one reason.
Buy. If you're talking about the dream scenario of Notre Dame making a championship run, it's like LSU in round 1, Brian Kelly coming up to South Bend, beating them here. And then, next week beating Michigan or Ohio State, one of the two. The next week beating Texas or team like that, and then championship game beating either Georgia or Bama. Like that's the dream scenario.
Because there is no conversation. If all of those things happen, there is no conversation, a legitimate conversation that you can say that Notre Dame didn't deserve that championship. That they coasted through, or whatever scenario that they would want to produce to have the talking heads go back and forth. That's absolutely the dream scenario. Number one, from just an absolute spite standpoint, no doubt, dream scenario, but also from a Notre Dame earned this national championship from start to finish in the playoff. So that would be just gorgeous. That would be just beautiful. Beautiful. Get on board with that completely. Because everybody knows I deal in spite. So Jace Whitney with a buy-sell hold, projecting what you think the receiver room will be like next season. Jaden Greathouse and Cam Williams are one of the top wide receiver duos in the country at the end of the 25 season. So we're talking 2 years from now.
I'm only selling that from the standpoint of I need to see Cam play a college football game, right? but from a pure talent standpoint, yeah. I think you're talking about the end of Cam Williams' sophomore year and Jaden Greathouse's junior year. I could absolutely see that happening. So I'm only selling Vince just because I'm like, let me just see the kid play a game first. But from a God-given ability standpoint, Cam Williams is a 5-star player. Jaden Greathouse is a big-time top 100 player. Could that duo emerge as one of the best 1-2 punches in college football? Absolutely, it could. I'm just being a little hesitant. I just want to see the kid play a game first. But just talent-wise, that's not at all a crazy thing to say. Like that actually, like, yeah, okay, I see that. I can certainly see that. But I just want to see Cam play first.
So it's a hold for you.
Just hold. That's a better way of saying it. Hold. I said sell, but I think hold is better.
Okay.
I think hold is better.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. I think with a lot of these questions and projecting people and things like that, a lot of these guys have never played it down at Notre Dame, and it's like, I need to see something.
Right. But the talent is just, I get it. I get it. And sure. We saw, well, you weren't there, but in the Jersey scrimmage, you saw Cam's like, okay, Cam's going to be really good.
That's good, because he was kind of swimming upstream there a little bit at the beginning of spring.
Well, which certainly was.
Which I totally understand.
He didn't play in the blue gold game, which sucked.
Yeah.
But, yeah, he is a good one. He is really good.
Jace has another buy-sell hold. The quarterback that wins Freeman's first title at Notre Dame is already on the roster. This is a great question. Buy. It's a huge buy for me, too.
Yeah. Buy. I've already said I think we're going to win a title in the next 3 years, and I even said in past shows I think that's going to be CJ Carr.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, not much to say on that one. Just because it's yes.
Between Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr, and then Riley Leonard, I think one of those guys have a chance to be that. Now the flip would be, okay, well, what if it's Deuce? Then obviously is the first one to win a title. Then obviously he's not here yet. But
correct.
I have CJ winning one.
The only hesitancy on this is that.
Yeah. I just have CJ. I don't even have a hesitancy. I think they're going to win a title in the next 3 years, and I think CJ Carr is going to be the starting quarterback on that team. I'm comfortable saying that.
Yep. And if some breaks go their way and they happen to win it this year, obviously Riley Leonard's on the roster. So yeah. Buy, sell, hold.
We're good.
Okay. Irish in talks. Buy, sell, hold. Traore ends the 24-25 season with more sacks than Keon Keeley.
I could buy that.
Because where's Keon in the depth chart? Like, is he starting? Is he a rotation
third or fourth
guy?
now? Look, here's the problem. Keon was never fit at Bama. scheme-wise.
Right.
That's the mistake that Keon made.
Sure.
I've said this all along. I don't think he fits at Bama in a lot of ways. I think he's a Notre Dame kid.
Yeah.
And I don't think he fit that system. Like being a Viper or potentially even growing into an end in the Notre Dame defense was a perfect fit for him. But he fell in love with the Bama thing. And I just don't think he fits what they do as well as he fit what Notre Dame did. And Boubacar, I think, is going to get more opportunities. So I think Boubacar – now, Keon may have more sacks in 2025, but I think Boubacar is more ahead in 24 that he won't catch him with the 25. So, yeah, that's where I'm at on that one.
Cool. CR Lewis 80 with a buy-sell hold for our guy Deion Colzie, and that he will have a big year in 2024.
I mean, I'm selling it, but it's only because I got to see it, right? And I'm not even holding it because we're not talking about a freshman. We're talking about a guy that's been on this team for 3 years. So it's like with Maris last year. It's like where I'm at right now with Deion this year. It's where I'm at with a couple other guys like Jordan Patelho. Like, sure, is Jordan Patel capable of having 10 sacks this year? Sure, he's capable of it, but yeah, I got to see it. So if we were talking about a young player, hey, Bo Con's gonna have a breakout year. Okay, I might hold that because I want to see him in a Notre Dame uniform, and we've seen flashes of Bo being that guy. With Deion, I mean, I think what's his career high in catches in a season? Like 9.
Yeah, it's
now is the talent there? Absolutely, the talent's there. And if Deion does have a big year, will I be shocked? No, I've said before, Vince, he's capable talent-wise of having a Miles Boykin type breakout season. Certainly capable of it. I just got to see it. I got to see it, and he's got to show it to me. So I'm selling it until he tells me otherwise. But the God-given ability's there. I'll never back down from saying that. I'll never shy away from saying that. The talent's there. Deion just has to choose, do you want to be that guy or not? That's and that's up to Deion. Like, there's only one person that's going to determine if Deion Colzie never makes it Notre Dame. That's Deion. Now, last year, that wasn't true because I think Deion got a bit of a raw deal last year. His position coach, I think, kind of gave him the shaft a little bit, and that's a different. But that's not the case anymore. Now you get a fresh start. Now it's up to you. And, there's some things I'm seeing and hearing that give me some excitement. But even with that, I'm like, okay, that's fine. But I need to see it.
Yeah.
I need to see it.
And that's why this is a hold for me, because I need to see Deion have the light switch go on for himself. We have seen him break out in a practice, in an isolated, situation. We've seen the talent for Deion Colzie. I was super high on Deion Colzie when he was a freshman and then going into his sophomore year and all of these different things. And it just hasn't worked out for a myriad of reasons. Some of them Deion related, some of them coach related, some of them injury related. It's just been a conglomeration of issues. And I still like Deion, man. And if the light switch does go on for all of those different reasons and he does have a big year, and again, your definition of a big year is what? A key member of the rotation?
Oh, I think that would be a big year
for him.
But I would say a big year to me is he becomes like a dude. I don't know that. A super talented guy becomes a key rotation player. I don't think that's a big year. I think it's just a good year. It's a solid. What I would assume what he means by big year is Deion has a Miles Boykin type breakout season. That to me, that would be a big year. 50 catches, 750, 800 yards, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
That's a big year to me.
That's a huge year.
It doesn't have to be Will Fuller. Will Fuller's huge year to me.
Yeah.
If Deion's 50 for 800, that's a big year. That's definitely a big year. Notre Dame's going to be a good football team.
He's got the talent to do it. I just don't see that happening. So I'm a hold on. To me, my definition of big year for Deion specifically is being a key member of the rotation, a guy you can count on, a guy you can trust. Maybe he gets to the 30 and 500 or something like that. That's a big year to me. If he goes more than that, then that's like a breakout for him. And I think the other issue for me with Deion is he's going to have to climb over what I think is some pretty good guys, on the depth chart at his position. And so I think that's going to be complicated as well. So we'll see.
Sounds a lot like a sell, Vince.
If we're using your definition of a big year, I sell it. How about that?
Yeah. No,
if we're using mine, then I'm holding. There you go.
And you know what? That's the cool thing about it. You can set whatever flipping standard you want. Well, I mean, but seriously though, as long as it's explained beforehand, like if he goes out there and has 30 catches for 400 yards and you come back later, I'm like, hey, I told you this is a big year. Like, dude, you didn't. That's not a big year,
right?
No, but I said before the year, a big year is he becomes a really important part of the rotation. Well, if he has 30 catches for 475 yards, that's a pretty important part of the rotation.
Absolutely.
That's a big year, right?
Yes.
For me, that's not a big year. That's just, okay, he's just doing that on talent.
Sure.
A big year is Deion Colzie being what he's capable of being, which is he's your number 1 or number 2 guy on a really good receiving core.
Sure.
And that's how I see it. So somebody said Greathouse, Williams, and Gilbert could be an elite trio of receivers. And I agree with that.
Yeah,
but it's like, but this is the thing that excites me too, is it's not just those 3, but next year you're going to have those 3. You're going to have KK Smith. You're going to have Jordan Faison. You're going to have the incoming freshman class.
Yeah.
You're going to have maybe one of Jaden Thomas and Deion Colzie coming back. Like, that's the thing that excites me about this receiving core is, man, it's not just 1 or 2 guys, and hopefully they pan out. And if they don't, you're in trouble. There's so many talented players at receiver right now.
Right. And that
they can keep them all on board. Like, if they can keep KK Smith on board and keep Jordan Faison playing football with those kids, oh boy, you are not wrong.
And that's the depth of receivers is part of the equation for a big year for Deion Colzie. You know what I mean? There's a lot of dudes in that room, man, that you're going to have to leapfrog at this point. So, yeah. Lucky Ducks 5-12. Notre Dame shows the quote-unquote love in the early parts of the game on offense, which leads to the opposing teams to pay the quote-unquote price late in games.
I dig that.
I like it.
Actually. I dig that. So basically, it's kind of similar to what the philosophy Notre Dame had that Lou Samoji would talk about, like in '89 and especially in 1990. Where they would have, like, I think it was like Rodney Culver and guys like that were sort of the main backs in 1990.
Yeah.
Right. And then they would bring in, this is what how Lou explained it to me. I don't remember this way. I was 12. but Lou said that they would, it's like Rodney Culver's, Ricky Waters, Tony Brooks, and guys like that. So that year, Rodney Culver led the team in rushing, who passed away on my birthday, by the way, which is a major bummer.
Wow.
Yeah, it was May 11th. But Ricky Waters, he had 710 yards, 5 touchdowns. Ricky had 579 yards, 8 touchdowns. Tony Brooks had 451 yards, 6 touchdowns. And then Jerome Bettis, as a freshman, had 115 yards rushing and a touchdown. And then Rocket had 537 yards rushing, 8 yards a carry. So, like, they would kind of hammer him in the first 2.5 quarters, 3 quarters, and they'd bring Rocket in the fourth quarter, and he just rip off long runs because they're worn down. They wore him down, and then they bring in the juice. It's kind of the opposite of that a little bit, where the speed gets you, and then you kind of bring in that hammer a little bit late. And, yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that. Certainly could see that. I think the only issue I have buying this, Vince, is I don't think either one of them are going to get a ton of fourth quarter touches this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe 4 or 5 games. That's about it.
So if we tweaked this to say like
second half,
big games, in the big games,
or I would even say first half versus second half.
Okay.
Like, yeah, comfortable with that. Yeah, I buy it.
Yeah, I buy that too.
I think we'll see more of a rotation, a pure rotation, but I think this is fair. I think you could also maybe see the exact opposite happen, where maybe Jeremiah gets more carries in the first half. Jadarian gets more carries in the first half. Jeremiah maybe gets some touches in some different ways, but then the second half, when you've worn him down a little bit with Riley and Jadarian and some of that, then you bring in the burner and he puts it away.
Break one, yeah.
But that's what Jadarian did last year, because what he's saying is essentially what we saw in the bowl game. Where Jeremiah was the starter, he got more of the carries early, and who was the guy that put the game away or, was there at the end, breaks off the 50-yard run as they're putting the game away. It's just Jadarian. He's the guy that rushed for 100 yards. Jeremiah was the starter. So I could see that.
Another one from Lucky Duck 5-12, buy, sell, hold. Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas. 1 wins 2+ playoff games, 1 wins 1 playoff game, and 1 wins 0 games or misses the playoff completely.
That's an interesting one.
This is like arguably 3 of the top teams in the country.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, but like one of them's going to have to play a first round game. right? Because it's 3 teams.
Because Georgia and Texas can't both, win their league. Yeah.
Right. So let's see here. So one wins 2+ playoff games. That means one of those 3 teams essentially plays for the championship. I think that's a bye. I think one of Ohio State, Georgia, or Texas will be in the title game, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's fair.
Or one of them, the team that doesn't win the championship wins 2 to get to the semis. That's 2+.
Correct.
So between those 2 scenarios, I think I'll buy that one.
So are we supposed to assign these 3 teams to each of these scenarios?
I think I'm just going to go buy, sell, hold for each, for like one buy, one's a sell, one's a hold.
Okay.
Or I mean, it's a buy, sell, hold for like of the 3. So like you're buying that one will win 2+ playoff games, and then another wins 1 playoff game, and then another wins 0. So I think it's kind of like, I'm looking at it as like kind of the entire thing. Let me go back and look at the question again on the board, Vince, but I'm kind of taking it as like,
that's fine.
You're buying that those 3 scenarios kind of happen.
I just needed some guidance.
Yeah. No, I get you.
Yeah. I definitely think the first one happens. That's a huge buy for me. I think one of these 3 teams, if not both, or if not 2 of the 3, could potentially be in the championship game, depending on how the the playoff shakes out and who's on what side, and all of those different things. But yes, I will buy the first one for sure.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to buy that one of them wins 2. I'm going to buy that another of them wins 1.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have to say that one of them is not going to even make the playoff. And I'm actually, you know what? I'm actually going to buy that.
Really?
Yeah. Right now I have them all 3 in.
Yes.
But I do think there's a chance with the schedule that Georgia and Texas plays, there's a chance that one of them doesn't make it in. And then there's a chance that they could get into a scenario where one of them makes it in and they have to go on the road and they just get a matchup that's just really tough. Mm-hmm. Texas has to go on the road in round 1 and play Notre Dame. They're not winning. They're not winning that game. You know what I mean? So you get what I'm saying? So like,
sure.
I just think that's and look, every year there's going to be somebody that we all think is going to be really good that's not quite as good.
Oh, you're right. I just don't know if it's going to be
any
of these 3.
Like right now, those are, in my opinion, the 3 best teams coming back in college football right now. Yeah. But I just think that the way the season's going to go, one of them is either going to miss the playoff or lose in the first round. Because one of them's going to have to play in the first round, and there's a chance that team could be on the road depending on how the season goes.
Sure.
Or get in that matchup what we've talked about before. They get that red hot team that's an 11 seed, but only because they started slow in September. Like I've pointed this out about 2016 USC. You're sitting there thinking, oh, we're the 7 seed, we're going to be good, or we're the 6 seed. And you're like, holy moly, that team got in at 9-3, who's won 8 in a row by an average of 30 points because they did a quarterback switch at the end of September, and now they're a different team. Like crap. I mean, that something like that could happen too. That's what's going to make this such a fun year, Vince.
Yeah,
and that's also why I bought that some home team is going to get beat in the first round this year. It's just you're going to get that real bad matchup where you're at home, but you're not the better team.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like It could happen to somebody that plays Georgia. Like Vince, it's not inconceivable that Georgia's got 3 losses and they get in as a 10 or 11 seed. And if you're the team if you're the 7 or the 6, you're like, you seriously?
You got to host Georgia? Yeah.
You got to play Georgia in the first round? Like, come on.
Congratulations on hosting a playoff game. You get Georgia.
Yes.
It's like, wow, okay.
Yes. What do they win, Johnny? Like, no, I don't want to win. I don't want to win. I want to lose.
I want number 2.
Yeah, I don't want to win that. That sucks. So yeah, I'll buy. I'll buy the whole thing. I think that one of them wins 2, one of them wins 1, one of them wins none. I think one of them will make it to the title game, one of them will get to the semis and get beat, and one of them won't win the game. That's how I look at it.
I'll buy the first 2, and just because I'm on the fence, I'm going to sell the last one. I could see all of the crazy scenarios taking place and all of those things happening. I just don't think it will. So I'm going to sell the last one and think that all 3 of them will get in and at least win 1 game. So I will sell the last one.
Okay, I dig it.
Josh Miller, buy, sell, hold. It's a seamless transition of power from athletic director Pete to Coach Freeman after a storied and record-breaking career as a coach. He does make a point of being at a lot of the other sports events,
I'll buy that. I could see that as being more likely for Marcus Freeman than him going to the NFL. Like, I could see him being here for a while, and then, you know what? Like, I like the business side of things. I like kind of being in charge of an entire program. I like being around all the players of all the different sports and having an impact. I could see something like that. Yeah, I'll buy that.
I think it would have to be. I definitely don't. This will come back to haunt me, I'm sure, but I definitely don't see Marcus Freeman as an NFL coach. I don't know. It just doesn't seem to fit. He just seems like such a college personality to me that I have a hard time seeing him in the NFL. So if you're asking me to choose between NFL and like athletic director or something along those lines, and yes, I'm choosing athletic director. I think, and this is digging maybe a little bit too deep. I think if he did do that, if that was the route that he did go, I think he would be very judicious to put together his athletic staff in a very intelligent way to prop him up on some of the business side. I'm not saying that you can't learn that stuff. You know what I mean?
My thought would be by then he will have been a part of so many of these deals.
That's fair.
You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
To me, my thing is like, this is something that happens like 12 to 15 years from now.
Right. After his
in 2 years, Marcus isn't like, I'm out. Right. I won a title, I'm out. I'm talking like in 12 to 15 years, he's still here and had that long career, and this is the transition that he makes.
Right.
That's kind of how I look at it.
I see Marcus as more of a shaking hands, kissing babies, being out and about. And not that Jack wasn't that way, because he went to a lot of stuff as well. It just wasn't quite as highly publicized. You know what I mean? When Marcus Freeman shows up at something, it's front page news, and a lot of times he's got his entire family in tow, and that definitely sparks some things when people show up like that. So I think that he from an advocating standpoint and all of those different things, I think Marcus Freeman would be fantastic as an athletic director. You know what I mean? I think like for the brand, and that kind of stuff.
No, I get what you're saying. Like, you're negotiating some $1 billion deals or $100 million deals. I get all that. And you're right. That's what I'm saying. Right now, no. In 12 to 15 years, yeah. I mean, he'll be almost 50 by then.
Sure.
He'll have been a part of a ton of these different deals. He'll have grown his own brand power in that he'll start to have more sway and say, because again, if he's at Notre Dame in 10 years, the odds are pretty good that Notre Dame's won something big.
Agreed.
And you win a title or two at Notre Dame, and you're an all-time legend.
Yeah.
And you have a lot more say. Like Nick Saban not only had the say he had and the impact he had because he won a lot, but he won at Bama. It's one of the 3 or 4 biggest blue bloods along with Notre Dame. And so, that's kind of how
I could definitely see it happening. We don't see head coaches becoming athletic directors like we used to, because there's just so much more business side.
It's much more of a business.
Than it used to be.
Because athletic directors of places like Notre Dame aren't like old school athletic directors.
They're not sitting there putting the schedules together.
They are, but they hire someone to do it for them.
Correct.
They're CEOs now of multi-million-dollar businesses, and if not billion-dollar businesses. That's
why Notre Dame's gone the route that they've gone with the last couple of athletic directors. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's the only pause I would have. But I also have a lot of faith that Marcus Freeman would surround himself with people that would fill in the gaps that he would perceive that he even had. Maybe he does. There wouldn't be the gaps that there are now, to your point. But as a good head coach, as a good leader, you surround yourself with people that prop you up and make you better, right? And fill in the gaps of where you're not the best. And so I think he would do a fantastic job of that too. You know what I mean? And again, as the face of your business or your school, who would you rather have than Marcus Freeman? Like, that's a home run. That's an absolute home run if things stay the same trajectory that they are now.
Somebody in the chat had a very interesting point. He said, I think it's more likely that Coach Freeman ends up at Ohio State, meaning like a reverse Gene Smith situation. But it's not really a reverse Gene Smith situation. It's exactly the Gene Smith situation, just different schools, because Gene Smith played and coached in Notre Dame and then was the AD at Ohio State. So, it would be actually the reverse of Gene Smith. He's correct. It would be Marcus goes back to the place he played at where Gene Smith did not. He went to a not. So, yes, he's correct. I could see that. I don't think that'll be the case, but I could see that.
Yeah.
I could see that.
He's just so loved. He'll be so loved at Notre Dame if that ends up being the case, and then it's just not the same love at Ohio State. It just, I don't know. Okay, Bill Shepard, what do you got here? Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame gets into the playoffs. Obviously, any win against any team would be the goal. But in this scenario, Notre Dame gets matched against one of these three schools. Which one would be your favorite to get a victory over? Buy one, sell one, and hold one.
And then his three schools were Ohio State, LSU, and Michigan.
Of course they are, because those are the top three on the pettiness scale.
Yeah. This is an easy one for me. Buy Ohio State, because I still believe that's the better program. That would be the bigger win for Notre Dame. And pettiness of Brian Kelly aside, it would be the bigger win. I know LSU's won 2 titles. I understand all that. And actually not 2 titles. They won in 19, right? And then they won in 07, right? I mean, they've been the one who's in 04. They've won some titles, but they're not the program that Ohio State is. They're just not.
Agree.
Overall.
They've been way more like this.
Yeah, very much.
Ohio State has been up here and then with peaks.
Now, the biggest storyline would be beating LSU because of the Brian Kelly angle. But I'm talking about, forget all that. I'm talking about beating one of the big dogs.
Yeah.
Notre Dame's already beat LSU twice in the last 10 years. Like, okay, fine. They did it again. And it would – now, which one would I get the most joy out of personally from a petty standpoint? It's the LSU game. But if you're talking about what's best for Notre Dame, and that's ultimately what I care most about, what's best for Notre Dame, it's beating Ohio State in the postseason. I'm holding on LSU because I don't want to sell that game, because I think beating them would still be bigger than beating Michigan, with all due respect, because you're not beating the coach that built Michigan up to a champion. Like, you're not beating the defending champs. You're beating the skeleton of the defending champs.
The shell of themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Their entire staff is gone. And all that. And also, it's still, Michigan is still not the brand that Ohio State is, that Notre Dame is. They're a better football team the last 3 years than Notre Dame. That's not arguable, but that's very recent history. And I have also said, I don't really care about beating Michigan. That just doesn't move the needle for me. It's like, you should beat Michigan, and so I'm selling Michigan as it's LSU would be a big one if it's in the playoffs. Because what they did beat LSU twice in a postseason game, but neither of them was on the level of a college football playoff game. So I would say, so Ohio State buy, LSU hold. I'd be okay if somebody wanted to buy that one and then sell Michigan, because I've said it before, I don't care about playing Michigan.
I will completely agree with Ohio State. That's the bigger win from a point of view standpoint, from a program, all of it. It's Ohio State. I would just flip-flop the last two. I would hold on Michigan, and and then I would sell LSU. I have kind of turned the corner on the Brian Kelly LSU wanting to play those guys, wanting to beat those guys. Like the scenario that we had earlier about what would I want my championship path to be, it has all of these schools involved, right?
Right.
And I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that. That's fine. But if you're making me choose, I will pass on the circus. Like I don't see it. I don't care about it. I would rather beat Michigan. It would mean more because there's more Michigan fans around here that I can shove it in their face, and I would enjoy that more. So it's definitely from a petty standpoint. And I'm just over the whole BK LSU phenomenon at this point. You know what I mean? It's not what I would pick. If Notre Dame draws them, then cool. It is what it is.
I'm just going to say this. I'm going to go on record as saying this. I believe in my heart that Vince believes what he just said. But I'm going to tell you right now, if Notre Dame got paired up against LSU in the first round of the playoff and they got to come here, you will see a unique – Vince will literally – this is what's going to happen. If they're not out of school – Vince will take that week off to make sure he's on every show that we have.
Yes.
Because he's going to, and he will say, you know what, guys, I thought that was true, but now that it's here, I've never won anything more in my life.
I've never wanted this win more than it. And I'm going to be there to watch it with my own 2 eyes as well.
Y'all know I'm right on that one. You know I'm right on that one.
I know you're right on that one. All right.
We have a super chat from Indy Milton fan. I appreciate you, man. I'm gonna read this one, Vince. I want you to answer this one first. Buy, sell, hold. that Notre Dame beats one of these teams twice, meaning regular season and then the postseason. USC, Florida State, and A&M. So it can be any of the three, but if you do buy that they'll beat one of those three twice, I want to know which one you think that is.
Sure. The one that would hold the most clout of beating them twice would be A&M. And here's why I would say that, because I think Notre Dame wins in game one. I have really no feeling otherwise, but I think A&M is going to be a much better team by the end of the season. And if they happen to make the playoff and Notre Dame gets paired up with them, I think that would be a much tougher game. I still think Notre Dame can win, but I think it would be a much tougher game.
Sure.
So I think that's the one that I would want to win, to beat them twice. Look, Notre Dame can beat all three of these teams twice. They have the roster, the coaching staff, all of that to beat all three of these. And so the way I'll take this is I will buy them winning against A&M the most because of what it would mean. I think A&M would be the better team out of these three at the end of the season.
Do you think it's possible that do you think it's likely that Notre Dame will play one of those?
Oh, God. Okay. So if we're talking from a
I'm not switching. I'm saying you answered it one way. I'm
gotcha.
Following up. I'm going to follow up and
you're tweaking it like I do to you.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So I think the biggest chance of actually happening would be Florida State. And so that would be the one. And I do think they could beat them twice.
Because agree. Neither game would be at home for Florida State. One would be at home for Notre Dame. The second one would be on a neutral field. I would buy it. Now, I would say I'm going to sell it because on my prediction, I mean, I'm trying this year to be more consistent with things that I say.
I got you.
I have predicted that Clemson is going to lose to Florida State in the regular season, then beat Florida State in the ACC title game, which would then mean Clemson is the team that gets the first round bye. And I think that puts it more likely that Notre Dame would play them, because if Notre Dame and Florida State are both at-large teams, they can't play each other until the semis. And I don't think Florida State's good enough to win 2 playoff games. I think they're going to be a lot better than people think, but they're not good enough to win 2 playoff games. And so in that scenario, I think it would be more likely that they'd play Clemson. So I'm going to sell the overall premise, but I do agree that if it were to happen, it would definitely be Florida State, and they'd be either the 3 or the 4 seed, which means Notre Dame as the 5 or 6 would get them in a rematch. So I'm going to sell it just because it would have to line up perfectly. And I could also see the committee either moving one of those teams around to make 100%. Sure you don't get a second round rematch.
But it
could be determined. There could be, you can't, because there's going to be some high odds of some rematch somewhere, that they want to avoid. Like I think that they would, like if Ohio State and Oregon both made it, I think they will avoid as best they can any chance at a second round rematch between those two teams.
Agreed.
And that includes moving Oregon. Let's say Oregon would have otherwise be the 7, moving them down to 8.
Right.
In order to avoid that match, or moving them up to 6 or something like that to avoid a second round matchup. I think they will try their best to avoid that.
Agreed.
Now, if you had to buy, sell, hold those 3 teams, one is a buy, you're doing it. One is a sell, one is a hold. Mine would be I'd buy Florida State. I'm selling A&M because I just don't think they're going to be good enough this year to be a playoff team. Sure. And I would hold USC because although I don't think USC is a playoff team in the scenario we described earlier, Vince, I could see a situation where Notre Dame beats USC, they're 10-2, they have an upset win in the Big Ten title game, and then Notre Dame plays them in a rematch. Or maybe USC's better than we think. Notre Dame beats them. They are that really good 10-2 team, Vince, that we talked about. They don't get into the AC let's say they beat LSU, lose to a Big Ten team. Let's say Ohio State, Oregon, and USC all have 1 loss. USC loses the tiebreaker. They get in at 10-2, and then somehow there's no way avoiding it. Notre Dame USC plays in round 1. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it'd be more likely that they win the Big Ten, and then Notre Dame plays them in a future round. That would be most likely of the scenario. But I think it's way more likely. Like, I don't have to jump through hoops to get Notre Dame Florida State rematch. Notre Dame's a 4-5 seed or 5-6 seed. Florida State wins the ACC. They're the number 3 or number 4 team. There's a good chance Notre Dame will then get them in the second round. That's the most likely scenario. USC, you'd have to jump through all types of mental gymnastics to do that one. Because I think if USC wins the Big Ten, they're probably the 2 seed. And so then, Notre Dame at, 7 or whatever, it would make it a little bit more unlikely. So buy Florida State, sell A&M, hold it on USC. So we answered that in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, yes, we did.
I like that.
We are Notre Dame, buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame will drop Stanford from their scheduled and replace them with at least one Big Ten each year.
I'm going to buy that. I think that's something that the NBC and Fox will want.
Mm-hmm.
I think they will try to encourage that strongly on Notre Dame. Hey, listen, it'd be awesome if you could get a Big Ten team to play you guys, because since now that Notre Dame and the Big Ten are sort of under the same NBC sports umbrella, now they're also with Fox and CBS, but NBC is a big part of their new deal. Then I could see that, hey, let's get Michigan State and Purdue back on a schedule. And I would prefer that as well. I'd much rather play for the next 10 years Michigan State and Purdue in intervals of 4 or 2, whatever. I'd much rather play one of those schools than Stanford. Much rather play one of those schools than Stanford.
Oh, 100%. Look, Stanford is.
Let me say this. I expect Michigan State to be a much better program than Stanford during that stretch as well. So I'm even willing to take a tougher game against the Michigan State with Jonathan Smith than playing Stanford. I just think that brings zero value for Notre Dame, other than it's going to be an easy win for the next 5-6 years.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. And that's why I don't want them on the schedule. But what will end up happening, I think, in reality, is that they will just go into the ACC mix, into the rotation. And so you'll get Stanford, maybe a home and away every few years. And that's fine. I mean, that's what Notre Dame signed up for. That, right? I mean, they're signed up to play 4 to 5 or 6 or whatever it ends up being ACC teams every year. And if Stanford's in that rotation, that's no different to me than playing now Cal if they're in the rotation, and I don't know, Wake Forest if they're in the rotation.
SMU, right?
Yeah. So if they're in the rotation, fine. They're going to end up on Notre Dame's schedule at some point. Cool. I just don't want it every single year. They add zero value right now. I would much rather have a mid-level to upper, but Big Ten team, and that's fine. That's fine.
And the best part about it is every other year I don't have to decide whether or not I'm going to go back to California, because it's just not an option.
Yeah, this is true. These are all true statements. Go back. Yep, there we go. John A1, buy, sell, hold. The Notre Dame defense will lead the nation in forced turnovers in 2024.
So let's see where they were last year. I'm going to probably say no and sell it.
It's tough to lead the nation in anything.
Yeah, but they were close in a couple areas. They actually did lead the nation in one area last year. It was in I think it was lowest quarterback rating. Their defense. Yeah, they were number 1 in the nation last year, and they tied for first in fewest touchdown passes allowed. So let's go to turnovers, where Notre Dame did well last year. They were, let's see here. Where is Notre Dame? Turnovers gained. Notre Dame was 13th. They had 24. The team in number 1 was 28. So they'd basically have to, so like the previous year was 32, 34, 26, 33. So 32. So most likely at least 28. Now, again, fewer plays last year because of the new rules. And so I think 28 to 30. I think it's possible. You know what? And they're playing I don't think they're playing a lot of great offenses this year either. So I'm gonna buy that, John.
Ooh, look at you.
I mean, they're only 4 away from tying for number 1 last year. And if you think about it, you got DJ Brown's dropped interception. And I could go point to 4 or 5 plays. You're like, dude, how did you not have a turnover on that particular play? So I could find some plays like that for sure. For sure. So that's a good one, John.
13 reasons why. Buy, sell, hold. A new stat similar to yak, yards after the catch, will measure sacks versus snaps and be known as a snack.
I would love that. That'd be great. Just so that I can repeat snacks all the time. Like, listen, he had 37 snacks last year. So, in all seriousness, I'm selling that one.
Yeah.
I'm selling that one.
That's a sell as well. But I love it. I love the concept. Yeah. I'm on board. I'm definitely on board.
Now, I could see something, that evaluates like pressures right? Becoming more of something we use more, but I don't know that it'll be called snacks. I love that though. That's so great.
It's fantastic.
That's so great.
I mean,
it really
awesome.
is.
I can get on
It
board
really
with that.
is.
All right, buy, sell, hold. SEC and the Big Ten now going with the two teams with the best record, and each team not able to play the same schedule. It won't be long before cries of foul during the weaker teams in each conference.
Oh, yeah, there's going to be some of that. There's going to be teams saying, like, I'm not in the SEC title game because they got a brutal schedule when this other team cakewalked into it because they played all these bad teams. Yeah, you're going to see that. You're going to absolutely see that. I'm very curious because I think the SEC, you're going to see it even more in the Big Ten because I think the SEC is kind of going to that pod schedule, I believe, correct? So even though I don't know that they're necessarily, I don't know that they're definitely going to be divisions, but the way the schedule works out, they're going to be kind of in pods, I believe. I'd have to do a little bit more research on that, but I definitely think you're going to hear more crying about that in the Big Ten. Number one, because you have a lot more whiners in the Big Ten, if we're being honest about it. I mean, Michigan's fan base and leaders there are whiners. Ohio State fans have a lot of that to them. There's some other fan bases that are that way. Penn State fans are that way. So, yeah, I think you'll hear that more in the Big Ten. Because there's going to be some teams in the Big Ten. You're like, dude, seriously? Like, if we had that schedule, we'd go 12-0 and not have a competitive game.
Yeah.
You're going to hear some of that. I'm not saying it's going to be true or not, but you're going to hear some of that. Absolutely.
You'll always hear that because any loser likes to complain. So
that's true.
Going back to our previous conversation from earlier today. Irish Cheesehead, Nathan's Hot Dog, Hamburger, Johnsonville Brat. Buy one, sell one, hold one. Well, for me, I'm buying the hamburger, I'm holding the brat, and I'm selling the hot dog.
I'm close. It's kind of like earlier. I'm buying the hamburger, holding the hot dog, selling the brat. So, Vince, you're going to have me find a place to have a good brat.
I know. And that's a lot of pressure.
If I was going to like that, I promise you the brat that I would want would be one that's like grilled, not at like a store.
Oh, 100%.
It would definitely be one that's grilled. Yeah.
Yes. I assume everything that we talk about is grilled.
Here's what I'm going to ask. So all of you, is Johnsonville brats the best brats to buy? Because I may actually go to the store today and get a good brat and cook it and just see if it's like good or not.
They're more filling too. And they just got more taste to them. And I don't like smothering my hot dogs with stuff. Like, I'm not one of those people. And so the meat itself just has to have more taste. And so brat usually provides that.
Okay.
For me. So, all right, buy, sell, hold. KVA outsnaps Osbury this year.
I'm going to sell that. I think Jane Osbury is going to play a lot this year. I don't think it's going to be by a crazy amount, but I think he'll have more snaps.
I agree.
So I'm going to sell that, but it'll be close. Now, if there's an injury, that answer goes completely flips.
Right. I think
Drake Mullen misses 4 games.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
For these questions, I think we have to assume there's no injuries involved. Buy, sell, hold. Rocco starts versus A&M.
I'm in an optimistic mood today, Vince. I'm going to buy that. I'm going to buy that.
That's optimistic?
That's optimistic, yeah. Because I think if Rocco starts, you want.
Okay.
Yes. Gotcha. Yeah, because I think he's the more talented player.
Yeah, me too.
So I'm optimistic that the thing that I think is going to be best for Notre Dame actually happens. I know that it's hard for us to do as fans because of what we've dealt with the last 30+ years, but I'm starting to change my tune a little bit. So
yeah, I'm with you. I think that's what should happen, and so that's why I'm going to buy it. I wish I was in the room, helping to make that decision, but they have yet to call me on that one. So.
I know, right? I've been waiting. I've been covering teams since 2010, waiting on someone to call me and ask me my opinion on who should start, and it hasn't happened yet, man.
Waiting for multiple calls from Notre Dame. Joe Rudolph can call. Freeman can. Biaggi can call. Asking my kids home.
Yeah.
All those calls. I'm still waiting.
I'm going to go on a limb here and say we're going to be waiting a long time for that call, Vince. Both of us.
Which one? All of them? Because you're right.
Any of them. Anyone at Notre Dame calling and asking us our opinion about anything.
Oh, that part. Yes.
I'm buying. Yeah. I'm selling that anyone at Notre Dame is going to call and ask our opinion about anything meaningful.
That's a fact.
I mean, there's been coaches that have called me about like, hey, you were at this camp. What'd you think of this kid? And that's been cool. But
sure.
It's not like, hey, should we offer him or not? And honestly, they shouldn't be asking my opinion on those type of things. Like if
good
point. Like, hey, give me like I'm a fan of like acquire as much data as you can.
Sure.
Right. And if hey, I'm going to ask this guy what he saw from the kid, how was he acting? Like, I had coaches in the past when I used to cover these events. Like when I used to cover the Under Armour thing, they would say, they would look at they'd have the Future 50 thing, the next, and they would call, or they'd be, maybe a kid they're trying to get on late. What did I think of him? There was a receiver that went to Vanderbilt a number of years ago. He ended up being an okay player. He wasn't that good. But they asked me what I thought. And, they're like, hey, watch him. They asked me beforehand, hey, can you watch this kid? We're thinking about maybe making a run at him, but we're not sure. We like his film. It's okay, but it's not great. Could you go and take a peek at this kid? And so I said, yeah, sure, I can do that. And so I went and watched him, and he was a nice player, but I just was like, nah, I don't think that's the move. I don't think that's the way to go. So, and like I said, he played at Vanderbilt. His last year at Vanderbilt, he had 20 catches for 300 yards. That was his best year, but he was just kind of an okay player. And so, but ultimately they made their decision.
Right.
Right. They made their own decision. It was just, they were looking for as much data as possible. They already had reservations. They wanted to know what I thought, and I kind of confirmed what it was. So, yeah, that's where I'm at.
Our man Archer with a buy, sell, hold. The next major change in college football: collective bargaining, more playoff expansion, the Super League, etc. happens in the next 5 years.
Collective bargaining, buy. More playoff expansion, buy. They've pretty much already guaranteed that we're going to go to 14 in 2 years. That's pretty much a given. And the Super League happens. I'm going to sell that one.
The Super League being like the top 50 teams, or
or two 20-plus leagues, and then the ACC goes away, the Big 12 goes away, and
gotcha.
Yeah, so I'm going to buy collective bargaining. They have to. That's literally what the court case, the settlement that they had in court was, that it would basically going to lead to that. More playoff expansion is a given. I'm going to sell the other one.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's fair. Another one from Archer, buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame is more likely to leave NBC than NBC is to actually putting a good broadcast team together for Notre Dame games.
I'm going to sell that.
I thought they have a pretty good one for this coming season. I can't remember who it was, but didn't they already announce it?
You know what?
I did.
Yeah, it's hold on a second. NBC broadcast for Notre Dame. I know that they got rid of Jack Collinsworth, so I do know that. It's going to be Jason Garrett still, but I don't remember who. I thought that they were going to replace him, but I don't remember who the replacement was going to be.
I know they're replacing Jack Collinsworth.
Dan Hicks. Dan Hicks is going to replace him.
There you go.
And he's good. Dan Hicks is good.
Absolutely.
Dan Hicks, I think, is also married to Hannah Storm, correct?
I believe that is also correct.
So there's some Notre Dame love there. But look, here's the thing. I think NBC, if Notre Dame is the team we think they're going to be, there's going to be incentive for NBC to make sure that the broadcast team is good.
100%.
That's just like,
and they've got more wiggle room now too, because before they were kind of saddled in with whatever they announced. Now with games of the week and all of those different things, like they could rotate some people in and out.
Didn't they do that for a game last year?
They did.
Well, in the Ohio State game, right? Was it that game that they put a different crew there?
Mm-hmm. And it was great.
So, yeah, I don't remember because I don't listen. I don't listen to the game.
Sure.
But I thought that I remember. Wasn't it like Todd Blackledge and somebody else? Right? I thought it was that, but I could be wrong. But yeah, I could see something like that, Vince. Could see something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because I think what the reason, partly what I say that is because they're like, well, wasn't Notre Dame good during? Yeah, but NBC wasn't really committed to college football the way that they are now.
Correct. And they have more of a stable.
They were still NFL.
Correct.
NFL's our baby.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame's kind of
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame is our minor league that we practice camera angles and practice. We groom our next play-by-play or color guy for the NFL on Notre Dame. That's kind of what they were.
That's why
so
Jack
let's send
Collinsworth
Drew Brees down there. Let's send Jason Garrett down there. Let's send Jack Collinsworth down there because that's our practice league for guys we think are going to be good.
Yep.
And now for a time, I thought it was great. Like when Mike Tirico was there, it was phenomenal. Phenomenal. He was so good. Like I would actually listen to games when Mike Tirico was doing games.
Mm-hmm.
But now that they've taken put a much bigger foothold into the college football,
sure,
they're going to have to improve their broadcast teams,
right?
And if Notre Dame is good, then they're going to. Now, what I think could happen is you could see Notre Dame not have that same team all the time,
right? It could rotate. Yeah, it could rotate
like that. Yeah,
which
but I still would like to see Notre Dame have, because like here's the thing: if NBC was smart, they'd say, "Listen, we're going to find a very favorable Notre Dame broadcast crew. Not that they're going to be Notre Dame homers. I don't care about that like some people do, but we're not going to be anti Notre Dame like it was during the Pat. I went back and listened to an old game the other day that Pat Hayden did, and you're like, you can just hear the contempt he has for Notre Dame in his voice. He's a USC quarterback. You know, like Doug Flutie was just awful. But like he would often, it almost seemed like he was kind of rooting against, you know, the Notre Dame at times, not verbally, but you get what I'm saying. So I just look at it, Vince, and I'm saying you don't have to get two Notre Dame homers, but to get two guys that are going to come across as more favorable for Notre Dame, or give Notre Dame fans, throw them a bone and go get a former Notre Dame player to be the color guy.
Yeah.
But you know who I think should be the play-by-play guy and the color guy. You know who I think it should be the two guys doing radio. I do. I think it should be Paul Burmeister and Ryan Harris. That's who I would hire.
Yeah.
You're already there, you know? So,
yeah, just move them across the field.
And I think side. Ryan would not be as outwardly homerish on TV as he is on the radio. It's a different animal. Ryan's a smart guy. But he would still very much be pro Notre Dame, right?
Oh, for sure.
Which I'd be all for. I think that'd be really good tandem. Really good tandem.
That would open up the radio for Sean and I to just take over. We'll just step right in and be no problem. So problem solved.
And I now don't have a beat writer to cover things. So thanks for thinking of me, Vince. Appreciate it.
No problem. He can still do it. They sign off after the game's over. So it's okay. He's still there.
Here's the second one there.
Yeah, there is. Buy, sell, hold with the portal, NIL, and expanded playoff. We never see another college football dynasty like Saban's Bama.
I'm going to sell that. I'm going to absolutely sell that. I think there's absolutely going to be some team that could potentially come across and be great every year. Like, listen, let's not act like Nick Saban won the title every year. I mean, he won one in 2009. He won one in 2011. Like, I don't think Nick Saban, he's never won back-to-back titles, right? Oh, no, 11 and 12, but he wouldn't have won one in 11 if in the current format. But 9, 11, 12, then they didn't win again until 15, then 17, then 20. So, I mean, will someone win 7 like Saban did? 6 like Saban did? I mean, probably not. But as far as a dynasty where they win 3 or 4 over a 15-year span and they're in the Final Four almost every year, yeah, we could see something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we could see something like that for sure. Especially the way that it's that way now, where it's like, you know, that team's got, if you're winning your league most years, you're one win and you're in the semifinals every year. You know, it's a little bit easier path. So no, I'll sell that. I'm not saying it will definitely happen, but I don't think it's going to be this we'll never see it again type of thing. Like, yeah.
John A1, buy, sell, hold. Rocco Spindler will lead all Notre Dame blockers in pancakes.
Well, if I'm buying the previous one, then I'm buying this one. It'll be him or Jagasol. And if one thing about Rocco is even when he wasn't necessarily playing great, he was going to get you some pancakes now. He was going to put some dudes on the ground.
Yeah, because pancakes happen on the run game, and he's never that really hasn't been the issue. So
yeah,
right. And
I could see that.
There's a lot of pancake opportunities, I think.
Billy Schrauth, Charles Jagasol. Yeah, I still like Rocco because I think he's the most.
He's a road grader. Yeah,
he's older. He's 20 pounds heavier than Billy, and he's 3 years older than Charles. So I'll buy that. I'll buy that.
Another one from John. He says, buy, sell, hold. The Notre Dame assistant coach will win the Broyles Award in 2024.
Oh, boy. Let me think about that one. So do they give them for offense and defense?
I don't think so.
It just have to be one?
I think that's what it is, yes. I think it's just one guy.
I'm gonna sell that. I mean, because I'm going to sell that just because I think there's going to be some coordinator that puts up better numbers somewhere. I think Notre Dame's greatness this year will be about how good both of them are, which I think kind of takes maybe a little bit away from them if they're like the voting process. And like Phil Parker won it last year at Iowa. Like, you know what? That's pretty fair. Like you won 10 games with that offense. There's not a better coordinator in the country.
Fair.
So I actually think Broyles has done a pretty decent job over the years of of not just looking the best coordinator on one of the best teams. So I don't know that. Now I think there's guys that should. I think Mike Mickens. Somebody mentioned Mike Mickens, but usually it goes to a coordinator. I don't believe it's always, but it usually goes to a coordinator. And I just don't know that if Al Golden or Mike Denbrock will get it, although I think that you should. I'm looking at the year, so coordinator. Yeah, it's usually a coordinator. I'm looking at Bob Diaco won it in 2012.
He did.
Yeah. I think the last time you could argue that was John Chavis technically the offensive coordinator? No, he was our defensive coordinator. He was the D coordinator at LSU back in 2011. So no, I'm going to sell that. It's possible.
Didn't your boy win the Broyles Award at one point?
Who's my boy?
Van Gorder?
No, I don't believe so. No, he won it in 2003.
That's what I thought. Not when he was at Notre Dame, but yeah.
Yeah, won it in 2003. In between Gene Chizik and Norm Chow. This goes to show anybody can have a good year. Sun can shine on the dogs. You know what? A squirrel can, blind squirrel can find a nut. Whatever adjective you want to use. Any knucklehead can win it every now and then. So
that's awesome.
Yep,
I'm buying it. I think Al Golden has a great shot at winning it this year. I think he's been on the minds of a lot of people with the defense. And I think the third year with this defense, I think he's going to make some noise this year. I just hope he's not. I mean, there's a chance he gets overshadowed by Denbrock because of what the offense is about to do. But I think the defense is going to be really, really, really.
But see, that's my thing, though, Vince, right there is I think they're going to kind of overshadow each other.
Sure.
So they're both that good. Like LSU in 2011 when John Chavis won it. That defense was really good, and it got more notice because of how bad the offense was. So like when they beat Bama in the regular season, it was something like a 10-6 game at Bama. Sure. Like what a great – where now it's like Notre Dame wins 35-3. Which coordinator do you want to give the most love to?
Yeah.
And so it kind of – you know what I mean? It kind of splits them where it's not like Phil Parker. Why do we view him as the best coordinator last year? Because he did a great job, and they won a lot of games because of him. And that's the only reason.
Right.
Where that won't be the case in Notre Dame. Neither coordinator is going to get the kind of love where they overshadow the other. They're both going to just kind of almost balance each other out a little bit. And if there is one, let's say this, if one of them does win it, it'll be Denbrock. And that doesn't mean that Al Golden won't do the better job. It's just because the expectation is already so high for Golden that it would be where Notre Dame's offense comes out, scores 42 points a game, and people are surprised by it, and that momentum of the shock of it goes there, even though maybe the defense is still the best part of the team. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it can be that kind of wow, Notre Dame's offense came out of nowhere, and look what they did, and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
Sure.
Well, I guess you could actually say the last time there was a non-coordinator one, it was actually 19 with Joe Brady, because technically Joe Brady was not the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, he was like the passing game coordinator or something, wasn't he?
Right.
Yeah.
But that was such an unusual situation that it's like, yeah, you kind of get that one, because that was just a crazy offensive football team. It's a good one. Good one, John.
BC from BV. Buy, sell, hold. Drake Bowen, Kingston Viliama Asa plays so well in 24 that they are starting side by side next year.
I'm buying that. I absolutely think that's possible. I'm buying that.
I think that's the succession plan, isn't it? I mean, I feel like
it's potential. The potential's there. Yeah. I mean,
in my opinion, it is.
Jalen Seed may have something to say about that.
That's fair.
You know what I mean?
Fair.
So they may say, hey, look, maybe they love the nickel situation next year, and they're just like, we got to get Jaden Alsbury closer to the ball. He's just too good. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not a given, but it's like, I'll just say this. The Notre Dame coaching staff loves Kingston.
Yeah, they do.
Right. We already know they love Drake, but they love Kingston.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's definitely possible.
In my eyes, that's exactly what I expect for 25.
Well, Vince, there was I think it was Sean Davis was with me. There was a series in the Jersey scrimmage where it was Drake at Mike, Kingston at Will, and Jaden Alsbury at Rover. And I looked at Sean and I was like, that's the future of the linebacker position right there. Like that'll be when Notre Dame has the best linebacking core in the country, is when that trio is on the field together. So, and that's the thing that I think a lot of people have missed is there's been a lot of fans I see, especially on Twitter, where there's a lot of silly things said, but like they almost have like a Drake versus Kingston thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a much better chances that at some point in time down the road, like that may be true now where Kingston's the backup to Drake now.
Sure.
But the ultimate goal is that they're playing side by side for Notre Dame, and Kingston's going to play both. And that's the ultimate where I think it's going to go. It's not an either or. I think eventually it's going to be both and kind of thing. And so that's where I'm at on that.
Maybe this isn't a good analogy, but this is what popped into my head. It's like the Hannah Hidalgo, Olivia Miles conversation.
Right.
Like it's not either or. It's like they can both be on the floor at the same time.
Who's going to come off the bench?
Right.
None of the above are going to come off the bench.
Correct.
I mean? Like,
It's a very similar situation. Like it's not either or. Maybe it is this year, but in the future, they weren't recruited to replace one another. They were recruited to play together, in my opinion.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right, because they recruited Hannah before they knew Olivia was going to get hurt.
Oh, 100%.
Like getting Hannah Hidalgo, she was a top 5 player. They were going to get her no matter what.
Right.
It just, now maybe Hannah doesn't have like the breakout first team freshman All-American type season, but she still would have been very good if Olivia came back. But I think they would have been a much better team, even better team, because it's going to be fun to watch that team this year. And this is the last question, Vince, right here.
All right. Buy, sell, hold from DMND13. Notre Dame signs 5 wide receivers in the 25 class, Brian.
I'm going to sell. I think I'm going to get 4. No, hold on. Yeah, because they don't have Sean Terry. I'm going to say 4.
Okay.
I'm going to sell and say 4.
Are they sitting at what? 2 or 3?
They're 2 right now.
2. Okay.
Yeah, because at first, no, hold on. They're going to get 2 more. But they dropped Sean Terry. So they're at 2 now.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I'm going to say they're going to get 2 more and go 4. That's my prediction.
Okay. There it is. You've heard it here
first.
Like
them apples, Vince.
I love apples. Granny Smith's.
Got to try the cosmic apples, dude. I'm telling you.
That's right. You told me about
life changing.
Need to make that happen.
It's life changing.
Life changing. Yeah. Okay. All right. Hey, you've never steered me wrong before. Why would you start now?
Not intentionally,
especially on apples. Like, why would that be what you've chosen to steer me wrong?
I lied to you.
That would be
they
weird.
Really suck. They're terrible.
That would be really weird.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us on a buy, sell, hold day. Really appreciate you guys being in the chat, having some fun. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit that notification bell. Share with your family and friends all the good things that you need to do to help support us. And of course, boards.irishbreakdown.com. If you want to be a part of a future buy, sell, hold, then you need to be a member of the board. And that's where it's at. And we had some people kind of throw in some buy, sell, holds into the chat, and they turned them into super chats. That is one way to do it. But the guaranteed way is to be on the boards and get your questions.
And if you spend $5 on the super chat, that's literally what it costs for a full. It's actually $1 more than what a full membership costs for a month, and we get a greater cut of the message board version of that. So
yeah, good point. Very good point. Hey, do you want to real quick go over the schedule for the rest of the week?
Just a reminder.
Everybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
So not sure about tomorrow. That's TBD. I'll tweet something out if I'm going to end up doing a show. I'll probably decide tonight or early tomorrow. Friday, we're going to have a show at 1:00. Vince and I are going to do a normal 2-hour show. And then we will have the we in, we out, right? Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
And then also at some point in time on that day, we're going to have a special show. That's all I'm going to say about that. And then Saturday, we're moving the mailbag from Friday to Saturday. So noon, 12 o'clock Eastern on Saturday, we'll start our mailbag. And so you guys better be ready to rock and roll. If just in case I don't do a live show tomorrow, and I know some of you won't be around, have an amazing Independence Day. Right. And I like saying that over 4th of July because it's not just the 4th of July. It is the day that we declared our independence from the Great Britain and started the foundation of what has been a phenomenal country. Hopefully we can keep it that way moving forward. But great day and one of my favorite periods of history to study. Just not even just with what happened in the United States, but just the world for about that 50-year stretch was just kind of some craziness. Right. So but yeah, happy Independence Day. And we hope to see you guys again here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.